Hello, good evening, and thank you for joining us for committee interviews that are being held just before our regular council meeting this evening. We will be interviewing two candidates for two vacancies on the Wetlands and Creeks Committee, and we will be interviewing our applicants via Zoom this evening. Do we have any public comment for the special meeting before we hold these interviews? Come on down.
My name is Joanne McGarry, and I appreciate being able to be present at these special meetings and making comment. As I commented at previous special meetings for the Planning Commission members that were interviewed and subsequently chosen visionary, we are moving into a very, very uncertain future in terms of our natural environment and weather and climate. And I would hope that people who are interested in serving on the Wetlands and Creeks Committee have a grand vision for the future and will not just be staring down at existing systems and projects and ways of operating. So I would hope that this visionary city council chooses visionary members of the Wetlands and Creeks Committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. All right, is there any public comment on Zoom?
I'm seeing no public comment on Zoom.
All right, well then we will be beginning our interviews, and so welcome to our two applicants, Emma Held and Stephen Railsback. And so we will be doing this kind of candidate forum style. So we will start and ask the question first to Emma, and then alternate order of who goes first, answering each question after that. And so we're just gonna go down the line here with the council and each ask a question. So we'll start at this end with Councilmember Atkins Salazar to ask the first question. And we will begin with you, Emma, and hear from both of you.
All right.
Okay, welcome, Emma. So first question is, why are you interested in serving on the committee, and what special skill set can you provide to this advisory committee?
I have lived in Arcata for about 10 years now, and I feel very strongly about giving back to my community. And as a fisheries biologist, I work down in the Mattole mainly. But I think that that is a very special skill set that I would like to bring to the Wetlands and Creeks Committee.
Thank you. Hi, Steve. Why are you interested in serving on the committee, and what special skill set can you provide to this advisory committee?
Okay.
Can we hear you now, Steve? Go ahead.
Are you waiting for me now?
We are, but your audio is...
Yeah, I want to start by apologizing. We were on vacation, and I'm in a motel in Red Bluff, and so things aren't entirely in control.
Right. Were you able to hear that question?
Can you hear me?
Maybe, yeah, we're going to say maybe if you turn off your video. So did you hear?
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
better.
All right. Yeah, like I say, I apologize. We're at the end of a vacation, and I'm in a motel instead of at home, so I don't have control over everything. So you can hear me okay now?
We can.
All right. So I have had a long career in river and stream and wetland management. I have done everything from working in a national lab on writing environmental impact statements for hydroelectric projects to helping run a environmental research program for PG&E. And since we moved to Arcata about 30 years ago, I've been working with people at the university and Forest Service Research Lab, and consulting firms in town on a variety of research and applications of river management. In particular, I've specialized in flow and habitat restoration and management for salmonids, but lately I've also been working on frogs and even riparian vegetation. And like Emma, I'm a frequent user of the city's natural resources, and as my career winds down and I have a little more time for extra things, I would like to give something back. Also, when we first came here, I served on the original Arcata Energy Commission that preceded the Energy Committee. And that was a very worthwhile experience for me. So that the positive experience I had on that a long time ago is another reason I'm looking forward to maybe serving on this committee.
Thank you so much.
All right, Stephen, you're up first for the next question. So what do you see as upcoming opportunities and challenges for the city's wetland, creek, and riparian areas?
Let me start by saying that I have not been especially involved in any particular projects. I don't have any particular agenda or project in mind. I think, of course, that we all have to be looking at climate change and sea level rise and what kind of issues that related to that we need to be prepared for. And how, for example, how changes in sea level and et cetera affect how the city goes about its business in doing things like developing property and managing the marsh and the treatment system. I think there's probably also some things we could do with just the habitat in some of the streams that they at least used to have fish populations. I don't know very much about exactly the status of the populations in some of the streams that go through town, but that would certainly be an interest of something that perhaps we could do better on.
Thank you so much. All right, Emma, the same question. What do you see as upcoming opportunities and challenges for the city's wetland, creek, and riparian areas?
So I think from a biological standpoint, there are a lot of places in which we could improve. I read an article recently that the commercial salmon fishery in California will be closed this year. And so I think that focusing on these important habitats for salmonids, but then also for birds and invertebrates and the people that live nearby as well is going to be increasingly important in order to continue using resources such as fisheries and things like that. And I agree with Stephen as well. I think that wetlands and riparian areas provide such an important buffer against flooding, which I know we're seeing a lot of that in town right now, and against flooding, against sea level rise, just sort of buffering against these climatic changes that are happening.
Thank you so much.
Okay, the next question will go to you first, Emma. So describe your knowledge, experience, and or connections to Arcata's wetlands, creeks, or sensitive habitat areas.
Sure, okay. So as I mentioned before, I moved to Arcata about 10 years ago to attend Humboldt State. And I think one of my very first classes was an environmental science class, and we took a field trip to the Arcata Marsh. So my relationship with that particular wetland habitat has been about a decade-long relationship. I've really enjoyed that recreation area and seeing how that is a benefit for the inhabitants of Arcata as well as the wildlife. And since then, I have held several positions working in river restoration and stream ecology. And as I mentioned, also, I'm currently a fisheries biologist. Um, and I have experience with habitat restoration projects, all of the necessary permitting and report writing and implementation parts of that, as well as monitoring, which I think is really important and sort of an underutilized method, just to see how to understand how these habitats change over time, and sort of see what kind of impacts we're making as a community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emma. Same question will go to you, Stevens. Describe your knowledge, experience, and or connections to Arcata's wetlands, creeks, and sensitive habitat areas.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to lean on my wife a little bit. My wife is Margaret Lang. She's an environmental engineering for state. And over the years, she's done a number of projects for the city and for Caltrans. And many of them, I certainly use the opportunity to get familiar with issues. So these range from working at the Marsh with Bob Gerhardt and the other people doing research there on some of the long-term management issues at the Marsh with the treatment system. I helped her with, she did some studies for the city many years ago on travel times in the local streams. So doing dye tracer studies where to see how long it takes water to flow from different places in town until it hits the marsh and critical habitat. I had a lot of my own background in helping design stream restoration projects. I worked with Northern Hydrology as a subcontractor on the restoration project on Prairie Creek at its mouth that Save the Redwoods League is funding and organizing. Let's see. And then I just spent a lot of time in the marsh and especially in the town forest along the streams. And so I'm fairly familiar with the different water resources in town and the main issues that people are concerned about.
Great, thank you. Councilmember White will ask our next question.
And it sounds like you may have already addressed some of this, but Steve, restoration and monitoring are important to inform our science-based decision-making and future management. Please describe your experience or expertise with natural resource restoration or monitoring that could be an asset to the city.
Sure. So what I've spent a lot of my career on here is since I came to Humboldt and started working with some of the ecological modelers in that department and fisheries biologists also, is developing computer models where we actually build an artificial stream in the computer and simulate the habitat characteristics and then simulate fish, especially salmonids, including salmon spawning and juvenile rearing. And those models have been used as a stream restoration project design tools. So I've worked with several different consulting firms in a number of different projects using our models to design restoration projects. And the key point is that even though my part is in the computer, to make that work, you really have to have a good understanding of the actual biology. Our models are quite complex and try to include a lot of the actual mechanisms through which stream habitat affects the fish. And so I feel like I have a pretty deep understanding by working with people in the local fisheries community of how habitat restoration projects affect the fish population. I won't claim to be an expert on monitoring because I work very closely with people, especially Brett Harvey up at the Redwood Sciences Lab, who's really an expert in study design and monitoring program design. And I know people in the fisheries department are good at that. So I guess the best I could say about monitoring design is that I know who to talk to.
Thank you. Emma, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
I think I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. So I began my work in river and stream monitoring in 2017, and I was assisting the university constructing longitudinal profiles in the South Fork Eel River Basin, which required a total station stadia rod, just sort of looking at the geomorphologic stream profile. Excuse me. And since then, I've sort of switched gears to a more biological aspect. I've done lots of macroinvertebrate studies, primarily my position with the Mattole Salmon Group is who I work for, and we conduct annual spawning ground surveys each winter in the Mattole River Basin. We also do pre and post project monitoring with photo documentation, and again, longitudinal profiles, habitat typing, those kinds of things. And so I am very well versed in designing a monitoring study or adding to an existing monitoring study with high quality data and very thorough practices.
Well, thank you very much. So the next question is, and we'll start with you, Emma, since you're right there. Please share an example of successful collaboration you have been a part of in the realm of restoration, open space, community building, and what made that collaboration successful. So I know these might be somewhat repetitive, but thank you.
Sure. So the Mattole Salmon Group is a nonprofit organization down in Petrolia, and we have several restoration projects that are that require input from many different from agencies, from organizations, and from community members, and those have been relatively successful, at least in our involvement. We also have, every year we have interns. We have a group of interns that come and we go through some of our restoration projects and monitoring practices with them as well. And so community involvement and community engagement is a huge part of my job currently. Additionally, we also have an annual summer steelhead snorkel survey that's held in the summertime, and that's a completely citizen science, community-led monitoring effort.
Thank you very much. And Stephen, did you catch that question, or would you like me? Well, actually, you covered a lot of it in the previous question, but please share an example of successful collaboration you have been a part of in the realm of restoration, open space, or community building, and what made that collaboration so successful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna assume, Alex, you were talking to me. I only heard about the last few.
Oh, I'll do it. I'll say it again. I know it's hard sometimes when we don't have the best internet. So please share an example of successful collaboration you have been a part of in the realm of restoration, open space, or community building. What made that collaboration successful?
Okay, I will use the example of the Prairie Creek Restoration Project where Save the Redwoods League was the lead. They came up with the idea of buying the old mill site in Oric and tearing out the old mill, building a new park visitor center, and doing a major restoration. They hired a local company, Northern Hydrology, to design the restoration project, and I worked with them to develop technical information for the restoration design. But a lot of that whole project was bringing along all the different stakeholders that are um, involved in that area. And one thing that was interesting about that project was that the key stakeholders bringing along were the agency people, the people that worked with the fisheries agencies. They had a lot of legitimate concerns about potential side effects of the restoration. And a lot of our effort went into working with the agencies on technical issues. So my involvement included developing technical information and working with those agency people to get them to buy into the project too. So my involvement wasn't so much with just the general public, but with the other agencies that are always an important part of restoration work.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, well, thank you to both our applicants. We are pushing right up against our regular meeting time right now, so we'll hold it at that, and got some great information from you guys, even despite some bad internet connections. So thank you so much for being here for these interviews tonight, and we will take a brief 2-minute break, and then we will be back for our 6 p.m. regularly scheduled meeting. So thank you, everybody. And we will be making a decision later in the meeting about the appointments. And so tune in. It will be our first new business item, correct? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right. Good evening, and thank you for viewing the March 15th meeting of the Arcata City Council. The City Council meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with both in-person attendance and teleconference access via Zoom. Our first item on the agenda this evening is a land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudini, meaning over in the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments removed the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from their lands and threatened to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism. Our next item would be the flag salute. So if you'd like to join us, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Schaefer,
Here.
Vice Mayor Matthews,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Stillman,
Present.
all present.
If you wish to make a comment during the meeting, either at the 2 open public comment periods or for an individual agenda item, there are 3 ways to do so. If you are here in person, please line up behind the podium when the item that you would like to speak on is accepting public comment. And if you are here to comment during early oral communications, that 15-minute time at the beginning of the agenda, we do our little card system here. So there should be cards numbered 1 through 4 for the first 4 people here if you want to grab those. And then if you are logged onto Zoom, click raise your hand when it is time for the public comment on the item you wish to speak on. Or if you are on the phone, press star 9 on your phone to raise your hand. And when it is your turn, you will be prompted to dial star 6 to unmute yourself. For each item, we will take in-person public comment first and then move to online comments. We will not be going back and forth. So if you're wanting to comment on an item, please line up at the podium or raise your electronic hand as soon as possible when public comment is requested for that item. So before we get started this evening, I believe that there has been a request for agenda modification from the owners of Mad River Hospital to postpone / continue their new business item E to our April 5th meeting. So is there anyone on the council that would like to make a motion to move the discussion on Mad River Hospital property to our April 5th meeting?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to move Mad River Hospital to the April 5th agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Stillman.
I'll second.
Okay, and a second by Councilmember White. And so again, for those in attendance, perhaps for that item tonight, don't wait all night until the last agenda item. Come back on April 5th. It will not be on the agenda this evening. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on wishing to comment. We have a motion and a second. So do we have anybody wishing to provide public comment on continuing new business item E to April 5th? All right. So we'll take a vote on that. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously, so we will move that item to April 5th, and we will now move on to our ceremonial matters. We have a number of ceremonial matters this evening. So the first one that we will start with, item A, is a certificate of appreciation for Dave Couch for his 36 years of service to the city of Arcata. And he is here in person to accept that, and so Councilmember Stillman will read that certificate of appreciation. Go ahead.
Thank you. The Certificate of Appreciation for David Couch for his 36 years of service to the city of Arcata. Whereas the city of Arcata hired David Couch as a part-time maintenance worker in 1987, Dave soon began studying for water and wastewater certifications and was promoted to full-time water wastewater operator in 1989. Dave quickly advanced his certifications and role in the city, becoming the water wastewater operator number 2 in 1990. Dave was promoted to plant supervisor in 2016 and led the city's operator water meter team until his retirement this month. And whereas Dave's extensive knowledge of the Arcata Marsh, both in wastewater treatment system and ecology and wildlife, provided a well-rounded approach for Environmental Services Department to carry out effective treatment of wastewater and stewardship of the marsh and habitat. Whereas David thrives in providing tours and education about Arcata Wastewater Treatment Facility and the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary. Dave is a longtime board member of the Friends of the Arcata Marsh and currently serves as vice president of FOAM. His dedication to the community education has helped foster greater understanding and appreciation of the Arcata Marsh. And whereas Dave, through his tenure in the city, has been able to mentor and train dozens of staff in enhancing the professional growth of wastewater and water teams and ensuring a thorough transfer of his institutional knowledge to the operations and historical trends to the next generation of city staff. And whereas through his diverse scientific and operational knowledge and focus, Dave has embodied the multi-benefit intention of the Arcata Marsh, and whereas Dave has long service been the best interest in Arcata, his residents, visitors, is essential infrastructure in the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary with dedication and focus. The results of his service will ensure a high quality of life in Arcata for many generations to come. Therefore, the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby expresses its appreciation to David Couch for serving the people of Arcata for 36 years. We wish him all the best in his retirement, and we commemorate him for that in it's March 3rd, 2023. It's dated today, March 15th, 2023, signed by the Mayor, Sarah Schaefer. And Dave, you're back there, and your retirement, you had people at your retirement with tears in their eyes because you're leaving.
It's been a great career. I didn't realize when I started it was going to be a career, but it's more than half of my life has been spent working for the city of Arcata. It's always been a great place to work, and I really love in the fact that I've got to operate the Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary, what's known as the Arcata Marsh to everybody, for years and years, and that's kind of a special treat, and I hope you guys will continue to support it through to the future. Also been in charge of the drinking water distribution system for years and years. And I see later on you're spending some money on that tonight. But I'll tell you, you're going to have to spend money for a lot more years because we have a lot of pump station with 50-year-old pumps and stuff that they were new when I started, or 10 years old, but now they're 50 years old and, they all need to be replaced basically. So that's something for you guys to, every year you're going to be spending money, unless you can get grants for it, which is, those are available out there too. And then I had a personal thing, I serve on the board for the McKinleyville Community Service District and have been an on and off again LAFCO member. And I don't know if you guys know much about LAFCO other than they're, kind of another onerous local commission, but it's the Hertezi-Korsbury Act set up LAFCOs across the state of California, and their goal is to preserve ag lands and prevent urban sprawl. So if you guys on the city council, when there are openings on LAFCO, I noticed that there's nobody in northern Humboldt on LAFCO, and there hasn't been for years, so it'd be really good for some of you to jump up and do that. And once again, thank you. Pretty happy. I've got my 90% PERS retirement starting next month. So it's been a good life, been a good career. Thanks. And I just kind of love the city of Arcata. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you for all your service to the city. Okay, our next proclamation is in recognition of Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day, March 29th, 2023, and Councilmember Atkins Salazar will be reading this.
So welcome home Vietnam Veterans Day, March 29th, 2023. Whereas the United States Armed Forces assisted the South Vietnamese government to combat tyranny during the Vietnam War from 1961, when U.S. Armed Forces arrived in Southeast Asia, through March 29th, 1973, when our combat troops withdrew from Vietnam, until the capture of Saigon by the North Vietnamese Army in 1975. And whereas, at the peak of the United States involvement in the war in 1969, approximately 543,000 American troops were serving in Vietnam. And whereas, more than 58,000 United States troops lost their lives in Vietnam, and more than 300,000 U.S. Armed Force members were wounded. 3 to 4 million Vietnamese, as well as 1.5 to 2 million Laotians and Cambodians also died in the effort to combat communist influence. And whereas the Vietnam War was an extremely divisive issue among the people of the United States, upon their return home, members of the United States Armed Forces who bravely served to help protect the rights of South Vietnamese citizens against tyranny were caught in the crossfire of public debate about our country's involvement in the war. And whereas it was not until 1982, almost a decade after the war's end, that a memorial in our nation's capital was dedicated to those members of the United States Armed Forces who lost their lives or who were declared missing in action during the Vietnam War. And whereas on March 28, 2017, President Donald J. Trump signed the Vietnam War Veterans Recognition Act of 2017 to officially recognize March 29th as National Vietnam War Veterans Day, also known as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day. This act encourages all community members to observe this day by learning about the sacrifices Vietnam veterans made to protect human rights and about the importance of helping Vietnam-era veterans reintegrate into civilian life. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby recognizes March 29th to be Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day in Arcata. The Council honors Vietnam War veterans for their extreme sacrifices both in Southeast Asia and at home, and express profound gratitude for their faithful service to our country. Dated March 15th, 2023, and signed by our Mayor, Sarah Schaefer. And I think, is Mark Riggle here today? No, okay, so then Logan Rosselli will be accepting this on behalf of Mark.
Thank you, Council, for this proclamation. My name is Logan Roselli. I am lucky to be involved with a variety of great organizations in our local community, but tonight I am accepting this proclamation on behalf of the Arcata Veterans Hall. I began working for the Hall last August as a College Corps Fellow through Cal Poly Humboldt to support the Hall and the veterans there and help get things moving again following the pandemic. I did not pick the Veterans Hall as my place of service. It was assigned to me through my organization, and going into it, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I hadn't had much experience with veterans, and certainly not veterans organizations dedicated to providing access to veteran services. But what I quickly found was that, just like any group, the Hall is a community of diverse individuals with countless different experiences, feelings, and opinions on all sorts of matters. I've had the time to get to know many of them and begin to understand more about what serving in the United States military entails. Truthfully, we did ask a Vietnam veteran to accept this proclamation, but he was unable to make it. And as my friends and I at the Hall discussed it, we realized that though this proclamation is in honor of Vietnam veterans, it is really meant as a reminder to all of those who hadn't served. And it's not just a reminder of the sacrifice made, but of how that sacrifice was ignored and shunned by many for decades. Really, if we want to get to the heart of the meaning, it is meant as a caution so that we might not repeat the same mistake. Yet in many ways, we are repeating this mistake. Since 9/11, over 3.7 million people have served in the United States military. And yet we still have veterans coming home who struggle to find housing, struggle to deal with resulting physical and mental health complications, and overall struggle to readjust to a civilian society that is relatively disinterested in their experience. If we really want to commemorate and show that we care about veterans in this nation, then maybe we should go beyond a thank you in a couple of days out of the year to remember them. Maybe we should help our veterans get access to services they need. Maybe we should take the time to understand more about their experience. And maybe we should stop sending them to fight in wars that most Americans don't have the most basic understanding of. If anyone is interested in getting involved and learning more about veterans, we have plenty of opportunities for you at the Arcata Veterans Hall. Coming up on March 25th, we have a Vietnam War Veterans Day dinner and dialogue event from 5 to 7 p.m. Everyone is welcome to attend, and veterans and their families eat free. We are also hosting a murder mystery dinner experience titled Entrees and Espionage on Saturday, April 29th. That'll be a really fun and entertaining night, and the proceeds will go to benefit the Hall and the Boys and Girls Club of the Redwoods. We're also looking for sponsors for that event, and we offer several sponsorship packages to help promote your businesses if anyone's interested. If anyone is interested in volunteering at the Hall, attending an event, or sponsoring us, please check out our Facebook page, which is just Arcata Veterans Hall, or call us at 707-822-1552. Again, Council, thank you.
Thank you, Logan, for sharing those words and all you do for the Hall and for sharing the upcoming events. So, sounds exciting. Okay, our next proclamation I am excited to read as a former Rotaractor. So this proclamation will be in recognition of World Rotaract Week, March 13th through 19th, 2023. Whereas Rotaract is a Rotary-affiliated group of young adults whose service efforts begin at local grassroots level, with members addressing their community's physical and social needs while promoting international understanding and peace through the framework of friendship and service. And whereas Rotaract originally began as a Rotary International Youth Program in 1968 with the simple mission of service above self, and has since grown into a major Rotary-sponsored service organization, over 10,000 clubs and 250,000 members worldwide. And whereas North Bay Rotaract, sponsored by the Rotary Clubs of Arcata Sunrise and Arcata Noon, and Lost Coast Rotaract, sponsored by Rotary Club of Eureka, are comprised of volunteer members who are committed to enhancing the quality of life for people in Humboldt County and the world. And whereas members of local Rotaract clubs support local and international communities by volunteering time and fundraising for programs such as Rotoplast, Inspire One, The Raven Project, Adopt a Highway, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and many more community-supported programs. And whereas to commemorate the founding of Rotaract in 1968, the week of March 13th through 19th, 2023 is recognized by members of Rotary and Rotaract as World Rotaract Week. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby proclaims the week of March 13th through 19th, 2023 as World Rotaract Week in the City of Arcata and Humboldt County, and thanks our local Rotaract clubs for their contributions to the community. So dated today, March 15th, 2023, signed by myself, and I'm very excited to present this proclamation to one of my past presidents of Lost Coast Rotaract, Matthew Sendejas, who is also my former high school colleague and was the one that got me into Rotaract. And honestly, I can thank Rotaract for my ability to speak in front of a bunch of people and sit up on this dais, most likely. So thank you to my Rotary community and Rotaract, and I'm honored to present this to Matt.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate it. This means a lot. Lost Coast Rotaract is a community service club. So we focus a lot on 18 to 30-year-olds. If you're in that group and you want to build your professionalism, professional development, networking, being part of the local community, as well as international community. I myself have traveled to Bangladesh for a 2-week trip sponsored by the Rotary Club of Eureka. We've had people go to Costa Rica. We've had others go to India. So there's international opportunity as well as local opportunity. So if you want to get involved, Lost Coast Rotaract on Facebook, Instagram, or lostcoastrotaract@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we're feeling very ceremonial tonight. We have one last ceremonial matter that will be read by Vice Mayor Matthews, and this is a proclamation in recognition of March for Meals Month, which will be this month, March 2023.
All right, a City of Arcata proclamation in recognition of March for Meals Month, March 2023, whereas on March 22nd, 1972, President Richard Nixon signed into law a measure that amended the Older Americans Act of 1965 and established a national nutrition program for seniors 60 years and older, and whereas the Humboldt Senior Resource Center observes the National March for Meals campaign to raise awareness about the escalating problem of senior hunger and isolation in our communities, and whereas through the Older Americans Act nutrition programs, the Humboldt Senior Resource Center has served the Arcata community admirably for 46 years. The center provides nutritious meals to seniors which help to maintain their health and independence and avoid unnecessary hospitalizations and/or premature institutionalization. And whereas the Humboldt Senior Resource Center's congregate and home-delivered meal programs provide a powerful socialization opportunity for hundreds of seniors to help combat loneliness and isolation. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the City Council of the City of Arcata that March 2023 is March for Meals Month. The council urges all residents to honor the foundations, service organizations, businesses, and individuals who support our senior nutrition program, as well as the seniors they serve, dated March 15th, 2023, signed Sarah Schaefer, Mayor.
And I believe we don't have, okay, nobody is here to accept that one, but thank you, and we will hold on to it and get it to who it needs to go to. All right, so thank you to all of our proclamation acceptors. You've now made it to the regular part of our meeting, but no pressure to stay. Yes, we see you rise up. But thank you for being here tonight and coming in and celebrating. Okay, so that takes us to item number 6. No, 5. Oh, we missed a number. Our next item on the agenda, which is early oral communications. So this time, 15-minute time period allows people to address the council on matters not on the agenda. Please know that pursuant to the Brown Act, the council cannot discuss or take action on items that are not listed on the posted agenda. And at the end of oral communications, the council may respond to statements. Supported requests that require council action will be set for a future agenda or referred to staff. Speakers will be limited to 2 minutes, and there will be an overall there will also be public comment specifically on each agenda item, and then again at the end of the meeting under item number 12. So if you are here to comment in person, please make your way to the podium. And if you have one of those cards, you can just set it up on the table here. And you will have 2 minutes, and this whole time period will be 15 minutes. So take it away.
Hello, my name is Joanne McGarry, and as you know, I like to talk about 3 things in the 2 minutes I have at the beginning of the meeting, but I'll try and speak on 3 things at the end of the meeting in the 3 minutes I hopefully have. But today I want to start off with the concept of the land acknowledgement, which I'm so appreciative of it's being developed and read in front of the meeting, and hopefully the written version of that will be made available and posted in the public arena here at City Hall, so that those of us who come into this building can read it and acknowledge what is being acknowledged. And additionally, I would like to suggest perhaps, and has nothing to do with the mayor's reading ability or anything, but that Equity Arcata members at the beginning of the meeting see if they are perhaps interested in reading that acknowledgement. You have a lot to read out loud, so maybe this will give them an opportunity to, present what Equity Arcata has perhaps developed in terms of this acknowledgement. So that's one thing I wanted to suggest. Secondly, I appreciated being aware that we could continue items on the agenda, and I also have experienced at other city council meetings in other municipalities changing the order on the agendas. And because sometimes these meetings go very long, I would like to suggest that staff reports be at the beginning of the meeting, because a lot of people pay attention at the beginning and fade out, and staff reports are really important. And finally, I didn't send you information about it, but I posted it on Nextdoor. There's something called eco machines that are decentralized wastewater treatments. And as our city grows and as our current equipment gets old, maybe we look at eco machines and decentralized wastewater systems for new development. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Good evening, I'm Fred Wise. I would like to thank the council for the proclamation of recognition of the Vietnam veterans. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge Julie Visade-Elcock, who is retired from being chair of the Planning Commission, where she served for a total of 14 years. We extend our great appreciation to Julie for her contributions to the city of Arcata. At the previous meeting, Rebecca Buckley-Stein spoke on low-income housing and the provision of inclusionary zoning in the Gateway Plan. This has been talked about by the Planning Commission, as Councilmember White knows, because she was a part of these discussions. It is not currently in the current draft plan. A transcript of what she said is on arcata1.com under what's new items. We have an upcoming joint City Council Planning Commission study session on March 28th about sea level rise. I would like to know if this study session is planned to be recorded either by video or audio, and if not, if the sum of $175 could be allocated to provide a video presentation of what I regard as a very important topic. In terms of the Vietnam veterans, I'm not a veteran. I'm of an age that I've known dozens of veterans, some of whom are not with us and some of whom are still with us. And it's your words, whoever wrote those words, are very touching. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Good evening, Gregory Daggett. It's been about a year since I introduced SB 1000, Environmental Justice and Local Land Use Planning, I introduced this through the scoping period during the EIR for the gateway. And I also went into quite details with letters to the council, planning commission, city staff about this in August. I think it was October, November, and a few weeks ago too. So I'm surprised that this is something the city was quite interested in doing a year ago, and I don't see any evidence of this being incorporated into anything. And it isn't just about the gateway. This is the general plan. It's integrated in the coastal element, which you have a draft that you're working on. And also, it's pretty disappointing to see that land use and growth management elements that were part of the planning commission that I've been participating in, there's no evidence of that added to that. So this is a big issue. You know, it basically, it's it's the safety element that needs to be updated in case of flooding, sea level rise, fire, air, noise, conservation, and traffic. And it's the land use and growth management too. And all these elements need to be updated, and they haven't. And I believe it's going to be passed on to you shortly. So that's a big issue. And it's just not, this is a law, and it's not just my opinion. The Attorney General of California is working with ensure local governments comply with SB 1000. So I would take this seriously and take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more in-person early oral communications? All right, we will now go to our Zoom comments, if there are any.
All right, our first communication is a call-in user. Number 2, call-in user, go ahead.
Hello, this is Kent Sawatsky. Can you hear me today?
We can.
Thank you. I first wish to reach out and thank all the prior speakers who spoke before me. It's so good to see people participating in your process on a regular basis. I hope you do listen to these people. They're spending quite a bit of their time and their expertise to help you with things. I just got back from Mexico, and Mexico is kind of the opposite of what we are here in many ways. Seem to be quite more functional. They really don't have much as far as lawyers go. There aren't lawsuits. There are notarios, and these are people who do land transactions. But they're not a litigation-prone economy or environment. And you're on the opposite end of the spectrum. So what I would recommend to you folks is find out from your staff, Karen Deemer, when your insurance will be reevaluated. I thought it was sometime in April when I talked to your carrier. And so you can become aware as soon as possible the additional costs that you folks will be incurring due to your gigantically difference in claims that have happened with the city there recently. So this is something that will majorly affect your budget, majorly affect your future planning as far as your spending goes. And it's just like the PERS and everything that's adding up. When these things go through the roof, you're going to have some major problems. So again, I've always talked about risk, minimizing risk. As today, I have not had response back from your staff that they have minimized risk when they've been advised of some things that should be done. And I think it'd be interesting for you folks to see the formula, how your liability insurance is calculated, and get a total assessment as far as your payouts in the last year relative to what happened in prior years. I think you'll be quite amazed at the amount of money that you'll be spending, and your rates will be going through the roof. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I did lastly wish to close. Unfortunately, it appears that, in my opinion and many people, Nordic Aqua Farms probably will not be moving forward. And I did notice today that it's quite possible
that is your 2 minutes. Thank you.
Is that my 2 minutes? Thank you very much. There's no timer here for me to see, so I appreciate that.
We will be back at the end of the meeting for 3 more minutes, so we'll be here. All right. Do we have any more early oral communications online?
We do not.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for your comments, and that will take us now to our consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, the item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, council members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. So item A, approve the minutes of the city council meeting of March 1st, 2023. Item B, biweekly report on disbursements. Item C, approve the project plans and award a construction contract for the Arcata South I Street Boat Launch Facility Improvement Project rebid to Mercer Fraser Company in the amount of $672,721, base bid plus additive alternative number 2, and authorize the city engineer to increase the contract amount by up to $100,908.15, 15% of the total, not to exceed $773,629.15, to allow for any unforeseen contingencies, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. Item D, adopt resolution number 223-43, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Arcata, amending the class and pay resolution management, mid-management, confidential, and appointed employees to correct a typographical error to salary range C177, Step 2. Item E, reappoint Michael Furness, Aaron Kelly, and Yana Valachovich to the Forest Management Committee for terms ending March 31st, 2026. Reappoint Mishka Stratka to the Transportation Safety Committee for a term expiring March 31st, 2026. And reappoint Christian Figueroa to the Planning Commission for a term ending March 31st, 2027. Appoint Guy Arnoff to the Transactions and Use Tax Oversight Committee for a term expiring September 30th, 2026. And item I, adopt resolution number 223-42, accepting a fee title interest and assessor's parcel number 505-251-011 and a public access easement over a portion of assessor parcel number 505-251-013 from Humboldt State University Real Estate Holdings or successor in interest, and rescind resolution number 223-08. Is there any council members that would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Whew, that was a lot.
If there isn't, I'd like to move for adoption of the consent calendar.
I'd like to remove item A and G, if I could, please.
Yes. Items A and G. And are there any members of the public that would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? C? Okay.
What is left?
We have B and F and H.
Well, I would move for B, F, and H.
All right, we have a motion for B, F, and H.
I will second that.
We have a second from Councilmember Atkins Salazar. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Motion carries unanimously for those items. And okay, we will start with item A.
So I had 5 community members call me in regards to last night's planning commission meeting with regards to the directive from city council to stop engagement, as well as a directive to the planning commission to have the general plan draft ready by July. It appears that the minutes do not reflect these directives. I did go back to the video recording not once but twice for our March 1st meeting. And that was not my understanding what transpired, but I do want to clarify with my fellow council members to get clarification on their understanding on stopping engagement on the form-based codes engagements and the July date for the planning commission to bring forward the draft of the general plan, and then whether or not we need to change the minutes accordingly if needed. Currently, right now, they do not reflect that, so I just want to see where we need to move for that.
My understanding, and I did speak to Director Loya about this, was not that we stop, engagement, but that I felt like the intent of what we talked about was to have more of a work item and to have some actual form-based code to then continue engagement with actual code, because people had been requesting, yeah, this is cool, but it's really, kind of ethereal and over my head without seeing an actual code. And so that, how I read it and what I thought our discussion kind of directed was that, that we would get some actual code and then continue the engagement with that work product.
That was exactly, thank you, sir. That was exactly what my understanding was as well.
I concur.
Okay.
So I just wanted, because somebody, several people.
I was going to say, I watched it last night also, and I thought that was what the direction was from council.
Okay, great. So is there anything specific then that we believe that we need to change in the minutes, or are we happy with the minutes as they are, just with that clarification? I guess
think
Director
just
Loya's not here, but.
Also the general plan, I went back to that same video, and it wasn't my understanding that we had directed them to have this ready at the March 1st meeting anyway, to have the draft plan ready by July for the Planning Commission.
And that could maybe be just a clarification or an agenda item request just to have, and so that both Stacy and Alex could be part of that conversation
Right.
too, just an update on timeline of general plan overall, and have that update and kind of solidify timelines for that in parallel with Gateway, if that works for people.
Perfect, thank you.
City manager, is that what you need from us? Does that
Yeah,
clarify things for
that's
folks?
fine. We certainly can bring an agenda item back around general plan timeline. I think the discussion of the council's meeting, their last meeting, was consistent with, timelines that we had talked about before. I do know the Planning Commission had pretty extensive conversation last night. So I'll just touch base and see, what the timeline is that they're working from now, that they feel comfortable, and then we can bring that to you.
Just one more quick question, just to clarify. So we're not stopping engagement for the form-based codes. We're just looking for some examples of what that could, something for us to chew on. But then we could simultaneously do that.
Yeah, it was my
Perhaps,
understanding.
maybe I'll.
Go ahead, no.
Because I do want to be clear that the original scope of work included 3 sets of 2 meetings each. There was an initial sort of online Zoom platform opened to the public and kind of geared towards getting public input. And then there was a follow-up workshop that was typically on a Saturday with the Planning Commission to go through that material and work towards recommendations. So we have halted that third set of meetings. We got through 3 meetings, and the Planning Commission had 1 more meeting. My understanding of the discussion was that we would use that 4th meeting with the Planning Commission to provide as much input as they could to Ben Noble to then go forth and work on the form-based code. And really, depending on the resources needed, to put as much resource as necessary into developing that code. And then, yes, we will resume public engagement with that code. What that looks like, I think, is something that we'll have to determine once we get a copy of that code. I'm not necessarily anticipating that it means 1 more set of meetings, but there will certainly be engagement around the form-based code.
Yeah, and I don't want to maybe talk too much about this with the other council members, but it was my understanding that, participation, it was less than robust, and maybe a way to get some more engagement would be to have something specific for them to look at, and so therefore, we're going to pause.
So the 4th meeting will still be a study session then? A joint study session or just a study session?
There will be a Planning Commission study session. It was scheduled for this Saturday. We have lost our quorum for this Saturday, so
Right.
it is being rescheduled for April, but that meeting will be held with the Planning Commission.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on the minutes of item A? We will accept public comment on the minutes. We have to accept public comment on this item, correct? Yes. Yeah.
So maybe you have still someone else behind you, Joanne.
Thank you. I'm Fred Wise. I also had objection to the minutes not being reflective of what actually happened. I wrote out what I think is happening, and you can decide for yourselves whether what I have here is valid. I would like the minutes to reflect that the City Council directed, well, let me rephrase. The summary I want to discuss is taken from the staff report to the Planning Commission at their meeting last night from David Loya. And so this is how he observed it. The council directed Community Development Director to, 1, stop the 3 remaining plan form-based code engagements, to prepare a draft of the form-based code for public review as soon as possible, and to complete the general plan and gateway area plan by the end of June 2023 for City Council review in July 2023. 2, the Community Development Director informed the council that there is still time to refine the work that we need to be doing now to produce good drafts, and that no vote was taken. Again, this is from the staff report from last night's Planning Commission. We can also note that the discussion included information about the general plan update, and council members Atkins, Salazar, and Stillman could have been present for that. I suggest in the future that any discussion of the general plan be separated from the gateway plan so that the full council can be there. And this is a copy of what I just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
I watched the Planning Commission last night, and I also went back then because Judith, mayor, had contacted Kimberly to make sure what did it say, the council actually say during the meeting. So that made me go back and watch the part of the meeting that I wasn't able to see. And I saw that there was clear direction from from watching it online. Okay. So with that, I would like to move for approval of the minutes with the whatever corrections. You're going to bring something back, Karen? You're going to redo the minutes or what?
We'll be up to let the city clerk go through the comments tonight. If you want to hold, we can bring the minutes back at the next meeting. I'm not hearing any specific changes that you've requested, but what I did hear is that once we kind of go through stuff, we will be at some point revisiting sort of the timeline of the general plan as an agenda item, but not necessarily a correction to the minutes.
Yeah. So then I would move that the minutes become back to our next irregular meeting, which should be April 5th.
Let me ask you a question about that before I second that. Can those minutes come back at the April 5th meeting since I won't be there and there's not going to be 3 people? I mean, is that going to make any difference? Yeah, it's just minutes. Is it just minutes? All right, well then I second.
All right. We didn't check online if there were any public comments on agenda item A, the minutes. So let's check online.
Yep, seeing none.
Okay. Great. We have a motion and a second to bring these minutes back to the April 5th meeting. Was that? Okay, just make sure I understood the motion.
Well, that's my understanding.
Vote on it. Okay, and we'll review those minutes and make sure that they sit true with the direction that was given by council at that meeting. All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Okay, 5 ayes. Thank you for item A, and that takes us now to item C about the I Street boat launch project rebid, and I will take it to our member that pulled it.
Hi, my name is Joanne McGarry, and I pulled this item because it's a lot of money. It's a rebid. It's an item that I saw on the bulletin board that was something that the Coastal Commission was looking at, I believe. And so when a lot of money on something involving the Coastal Commission and something in our waterways and marsh area, I would just prefer to have it pulled and explained a little bit so that it's captured for the people in the public who maybe are curious about what this all means, because that's $750,000 we're talking potentially. So if there's someone here who could speak a little bit more on this, and has the Coastal Commission okayed this? And I just am asking those kind of questions. It says it's a lot of money. It's always an interesting issue when it's something in the coastal area and it involves our greater marsh concept.
All right. Can we get a quick staff report on item C?
Hi, I'm David Case, the Assistant City Engineer. I'll just start with maybe a little bit of background. This project came to council last year, so we have seen it before, but it's for, we have a Department of Boating and Waterways grant that pays for the majority of this project, I would say. And it's for it's not really a boat ramp, it's more of a kayak boat launch. It's got a gangway that goes out, and it's just a launch that floats up and down with the tides, supported by 2 piles, and it has some new parking improvements and some sidewalk improvements and stuff like that. So that's generally the scope of that. We do have, I believe we have all of our permits through the Coastal Commission and everyone for the project, and it's essentially ready to go. Trying to think, I know there's probably more I should speak to, but
you have the bathroom.
Have any comments?
The new bathroom.
The original The original bid had an additive alternative for a vault toilet, but that was eliminated partially because ended up becoming the bids ended up being over what we had budgeted, and so we had two additive alternatives. One was the vault toilet, and one was for some striping. The striping was a small amount, and we felt that that was probably something that could be covered with additional city funds, but the vault toilet itself was quite a bit over, so that was eliminated for that reason, but also for maintenance reasons and future upkeep.
So the rebid, explain the rebid.
So,
Okay, Joanne, you already got your time to comment.
Okay, that's fine.
But
All right, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Those are the questions I was asking.
so this came out to bid and it wasn't within budget when we bid it before, and so we didn't accept any of the bids on it, and now we have sent it out to rebid and it falls within budget, and we're gonna do the project now. Yeah. Yeah, this project has been approved, and it was approved like, God, a long time ago, and we were gonna do it, and then it just was not in budget, but now things seem better. So, looks good. All right. Is there any other public comment on this item for those who have not had the chance yet to comment on this item?
There is none online.
All right. So do we have a motion and a second for
Yes.
item C?
So I'll move for approval of the project plans and award the construction for the contract. Do you want me to read Arcata's?
Item C.
C, item C. I'll just leave
That's
it at that.
okay with our clerk. That's okay with me.
Okay. I move for item C.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Stillman, second by Vice Mayor Matthews. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Motion passes. And then nextly, item D was pulled. Item D was pulled.
So again, based on that Sunshine Week ceremonial proclamation of a couple of weeks ago, just a little explanation of what was the typographical error that we're correcting so that we're amending this resolution.
Okay, is that your comment? That's it. Okay. Quick little staff report about our little typo.
Sure. We, when we hired an incoming staff member, we recognized in our accounting system when we put this person in at a range at step 2 of our salary range, that our computerized software was slightly different than what our resolution said. And the rest of that range was correct. Had we brought her in at step 1, 3, 4, 5, or 5A would have been correct. We had nobody else in this particular classification, but there was just a transposing of numbers. So we wanted to make sure, she has always been paid correctly, but we just wanted to make sure that our resolution reflected the correct pay that was in our accounting software as well for that classification.
All right, I'm going to move to accept item D.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on item D. Is there any other public comment in person or on Zoom for those that have not commented on this item?
None online.
All right. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on item D. All in favor of approving item D?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right. Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item E, to reappoint some of our members of the Forest Management Committee. And so we comment on that item.
I am all in favor of the reappointment of these people. I know 2 of them fairly well. One of the things I just wanted to comment on is that a lot of the committees were meeting, of course, remotely because of the pandemic. I do know that the Forest Committee oftentimes meets up in the forest, which I actually kind of appreciate, kind of being in the place that they're discussing is kind of nice. I just want to make sure that those of us who are interested in participating at such a meeting, because it's not going to be in a traditional room, that there's good notification and the committee is open to having members of the public attend those meetings if they're going to be held up at Redwood Community Park Forest. So I just wanted to call attention to that, because sometimes we can get so insular in our committees that, you know, people don't realize that they have the ability to attend these meetings and that they can, and that these meetings sometimes are held up in the woods. in the early morning sometimes. So just wanted to say that out loud to everybody.
So,
Great. Thank you, Joanne. And I know that usually the Fridays before meetings, that media blast that gets posted with the press releases on our website, and Logan sends it out to the email lists, and I try to repost it, but it does, post those agendas, and I assume that it posts where those meetings are happening as well, if they're offsite. So.
but historically speaking, this committee has always met first thing in the morning because they go to work.
Early risers. All right.
I'd like to approve item E.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second on item E. Is there any other public comment on item E?
There is none online.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And so thank you and congratulations to our reappointed Forest Management Committee members. Okay, that takes us to item G, to reappoint Christian Figueroa to the Planning Commission for a term ending March 31st, 2027. And I believe Councilmember White pulled that item if you want to bring up your concerns.
Not a concern, I just commendation. I just want to thank Christian for his service and say it was really an honor to serve with him. Very much enjoyed serving with Christian on the Planning Commission. He brings to the table, in particular, expertise from the engineering perspective, and I'm really happy to hear that he'll be continuing to serve on the Planning Commission. And maybe just to piggyback on what Fred Bryce said, I just would also like to thank Julie Vesaida for her many years of service on the Planning Commission. I think it was like 12, and she will be dear. 14. Okay, yeah, thank you. Long time.
She served twice.
Yeah, two separate. Yeah, and so she'll be dearly missed, and it was also an honor to serve with her my entire time that I was on the commission for 3. So anyway, that's it.
So
Yes,
I would move for item G, and I think he brings a lot of value because of his landscaping background with Caltrans.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and yes, thank you, Christian, for your desire to continue to serve on the Planning Commission as well. And just a little plug to the public, we do have a vacancy on the Planning Commission. If you are interested in applying, those materials are posted online. All right, we had a motion by Councilmember Stillman and a second by Vice Mayor Matthews. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you. And lastly, that takes us to item I. And I believe, yes, okay.
Maybe and a specifics of what these parcels and the university and the transfer. I mean, it's a little legalese or real estatey or something for me, and just like a clarification in better understood language to the layperson of what this is all about. Thank you.
Yes, I garbled some numbers and letters and various things on that item as well. So we'll get a clarification. It looks like Emily Benvey is up here to let us know about it.
Sure. Good evening, council members. So in a very brief summary, this is a property acquisition the city has been working towards since 2019. This item, in effect, came before you in August of 2022. The difference is that since working with the title company after the council approved moving forward in August 2022, there was a correction to the legal description needed. So that correction has been made, which is why this item is back before you. What this will do is enable the city to move forward in acquiring a 1.3 acre parcel that will expand the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary, and bringing it back to the overall intent of this acquisition from a couple years ago is it helps complete one of the final coastal development permit conditions of the McDaniel Slough Restoration Project to secure an additional public access point.
So
Glad we can clarify that.
Is there any, if there's nothing else, I would move for adoption of I.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's check for any last minute public comment in person or online.
Nothing online.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Stillman and Vice Mayor Matthews. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries unanimously, and that takes us to the end of the consent calendar and into new business. So our first item under new business is item A, to appoint up to 2 new members to the Wetlands and Creeks Committee. We had our interviews just before this meeting. For one term that will begin immediately and end March 31st, 2024. and then for another term that will begin on April 1st, 2023, and will end March 31st, 2026. So do we have any questions or comments from the council or any discussion about either of those members of the possible committee here?
No, but I would like to move.
Okay, Alex, Stacey's got.
You want to wait? Oh,
It's okay. I was just going to say, even though there was connectivity issues, Stephen Railsback's application was great. And so I was just going to, if there's not any discussion, to make a motion for the term beginning immediately and ending March 31st, 2024 for Stephen Railsback, and Emma Held for the term beginning April 1st, 2023 and ends March 31st, 2026.
All right, thank you for clarifying those start dates, and then I heard a second over here from Alex. All right, so we have a motion and a second on that. Yes, we had two very qualified candidates that have both been environmental engineers, a current wildlife biologist, salmon biologist, people that sounded really excited to want to get involved in this committee too, so it's great to hear. So we have a motion and a second on that. Let's now take public comment on this item. We do need to take public comment. So if anybody in person would like to comment on our interview appointments, or if there's anybody online.
We have one online comment. Sherry, go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, you guys are moving so fast. I apologize. I heard the name of Steve Railsback, and who is the other one? Then that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Emma Hurd.
Thanks.
Held. Sorry, was that it on your comment, Sherry? Sorry. You just wanted a clarification.
Yep, that was my only question. Thank
Okay,
you.
Great. Glad we could clarify. All right, so we have a motion a second. If there is no more public comment, we will move forward on voting on these appointments. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. All right, that'll take us to item B, which is to receive a presentation on CalPERS pension update from GovInvest. So may we have a staff report from Finance Director Tabitha Miller. And welcome, Tabitha. I feel like this might be one of our first staff reports at a meeting here, so thank you.
It is. Good evening. Thank you. This is my debut, I guess, as you would say. And this first item is pretty straightforward. We're going to actually turn it over to the representatives from GovInvest, the experts in pensions, and they're going to present the item. And really what we would ask the City Council to kind of provide at the end of this is direction on whether or not the topic is something that you'd like to explore further, mostly looking at potential ways to reduce or even curtail some of the costs that we're coming up on. It is going to be a large budget item in future years, and I think being as progressive and looking forward to this item and looking at ways that we maybe can mitigate some of those costs would be great. But I'm going to actually turn it over to the GovInvest folks because they are the experts here.
All right, so I'm going to introduce Ira Summer, who's going to be doing the predominantly the presentation tonight. Ira, is there anybody else in the attendees that I should be letting in to present with you?
I don't know if, let me take a look at the attendees. I think I've been abandoned by my cohorts.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll be fine alone.
Okay.
I'll be speaking, but I think the numbers going to be speaking for me as we go through this.
All right, and I'll go ahead and let you share your screen. I do have it pulled up here and as a backup for you.
Okay, let's see if technology works. Can you all see the PowerPoint presentation up on the screen?
We can.
Yay. Okay, so far victory. All right, so I'm here to give you basically an update on your CalPERS pension. CalPERS is the California Public Employee Retirement System, and that's where the administrator that you use to pay pensions to your employees. Basically, I'm going to go through, sorry, a little quick. I'm going to go through some of the basics of how CalPERS works and what benefits you have. Talk about how your agency compares to others, then talk about what changes have happened to CalPERS since the last valuation and the impact of those changes on your costs, and then finish up with some actions you might decide to take in the future, general areas where you can start doing things to take better control of what's going on with the costs. So when I start with the basics, I like to start with the absolute basic, which is when CalPERS determines costs. A lot of people consider this some sort of magic or arbitrary. It's not. It's got a basic concept. The basic concept is that the money going into CalPERS is designed to be enough to equal the money coming out of CalPERS. The money going out of CalPERS is a combination of the benefits paid to your people and expenses. And of those two, benefits is by far the largest. CalPERS expenses are 10 basis points, or about 0.1% of your assets, making CalPERS one of the most cost-effective benefit administrators in the country. Money coming into the plan comes from basically three sources: employee contributions, city contributions, and investment income. And of those three, by far the largest is investment income. Depending on how the markets are doing at any point in time, investment income could be anywhere from 60 to 90% of the money coming into the plan. Now, that's great news in terms of keeping your costs down. It is not good news when it comes to volatile markets and how volatile that can make the contributions from year to year for the city. Because if investment income goes down, your contributions are going up. Investment income goes up, your contributions are going down. Now, CalPERS does their best to try and keep things steady as a percentage of payroll across time. They do this by projecting out what benefits are going to be paid at what time. To do that, they need to make a series of assumptions. Economic assumptions, things related to money, like investment return, salary growth, inflation, and demographic assumptions, assumptions related to your people, like when are your employees going to retire? Which of them might become disabled while working for the city and start collecting benefits early? When are the retirees going to die? Which employees might leave before collecting pensions? So all of that gets taken into account so the CalPERS collects the right amount of money, not too much, not too little across time. Now they do that based on your benefits with your people. Your benefit structures, basically you have two classifications of employees, miscellaneous and safety. Miscellaneous are sort of the general employees working throughout the city, and they fall into three tiers depending on when they were hired. For those hired on or before June 23rd, 2013, they're in Tier 1. Tier 1 formula is 2.7 at 55. That means that if somebody retires at age 55, they get 2.7% of their benefit for each year they work. So if someone starts at 35, goes to 55, they get 20 years of service, 20 times 2.7, 54%. They get 54% of their final pay every year for the rest of their lives. The final pay is determined based on the highest 12 months pay during their career. On top of that, the benefits increase each year with a cost of living adjustment that is the greater of, or sort of the lesser of inflation, or 2%. To get that benefit, the Tier 1 people pay 8% of their pay, plus you've negotiated an additional employee contribution of somewhere between 1% and 3% of pay, depending on what bargaining group they're in. You created Tier 2, your city council did, in June of 2012. So people hired between June 24th, 2012 and the end of 2012 are in the 2% of 55, so a slightly lower benefit. They pay a little bit less, 7% of pay, plus again the additional 1% to 3% of pay. In 2012, Governor Brown and the legislature passed a law that's called PEPRA, Public Employee Pension Reform Act. One of the key features of that law was the creation of a new benefit formula for all employees, all public sector employees throughout the state of California, and they would receive the same benefit formula no matter what agency they work in. That formula is the 2% at 62, based on the highest 36 months pay throughout their career. And the contributions, instead of being a fixed amount across time, are equal to 50% of normal costs. Normal cost is the actuarial term referring to the cost for each year of service as it's earned. So 50% of normal cost. When the assumptions change, these change. And so effective July 1, 2023, the contributions for people in PEPRA are going to increase up to 7.75% of pay. If I remember correctly, I think they were at 6.75% before this. So they're going up significantly at, beginning July 1, 2023. There are also some additional employee contributions, somewhere between 0 and 3% of pay for members who are in PEPRA. This is just the miscellaneous employees, safety members, which generally across the state becomes police or fire, pay, depending on, also have a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3. The tier 1 was a 3% of 50. The tier 2 is a 3% of 55. And the PEPRA formula is now a 2.7 at 55. And their contributions for the PEPRA members under safety are also going up effective July 1, 2023 to 13.75% of pay. Plus they pay an additional 1.5%. So the total is going to be 15.25% moving forward. Now, your workforce right now, as of the most recent valuation, was about half in the tier 1 and tier 2 and half in the PEPRA, roughly. The most recent valuation was done as of June 30, 2021. If the turnover follows the patterns projected across the state by CalPERS actuaries, and you hire just to replace those people, within 5 years, 2/3 of your workforce will be PEPRA. Within 10 years, 3/4 will be PEPRA. And then it'll keep growing. So as that happens, your workforce is going to shift from being the more expensive classic formulas to the less expensive PEPRA. So your normal cost is projected to decrease as a percentage of payroll over the next decade, coming down as the mix from the more expensive plan to the less expensive plan occurs. Any questions so far? I've been able to go through the first few minutes without taking a breath. I'm going to try and take a quick breath and see if anyone has any questions yet.
Ira, this is Karen. I'll just offer for the council, the reason that we have 3 tiers is because we didn't know that the governor was going to come in and do such sweeping reform. But what we did know is that we had costs that the community wasn't going to be able to afford over time. So at the negotiating bargaining table with our represented employees, we actually negotiated a lower tier retirement system. And so that's why you have that sort of in the middle. And we only have a handful of employees that are on that middle tier that came in that 1 year period, and then the state came in. So that's why we have that.
Right, and there are a number of agencies throughout the state who felt the same pressure, made changes like that in 2012, which probably also led to Governor Brown making his changes at the same time. The other thing I do want to mention is if you hire somebody from another CalPERS agency who happened to have been hired with their other CalPERS agency prior to 2013, that person would go into your tier 2. Okay, so
can I stop? I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop you 1 second. Can you go back to so somebody from another agency started in 2010, but then they come here, they don't start at tier 1, they start at tier 2. Okay, cool. Yes, Karen? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to go through comparing how your agency is doing compared to other agencies in CalPERS across the state. Do that based on 2 metrics. One is funded percentage. So basically, how well funded are your debts or your pension debt? We do that by calculating plan assets divided by the plan liabilities. That's calculated as of June 30, 2021. The reason that date is picked is because that's the date of the most recent actuarial valuation released by CalPERS. That valuation was released in August of 2022, and it's used to determine your required contribution for the 23-24 fiscal year. So we have data from all of the CalPERS agencies as of that date, so we match you up against those. We also match up the total contribution percentage. So that's the required contribution that you're expected to make in fiscal year 2023 divided by your projected pensionable compensation. That way it's a percentage so that we can match you up against other agencies that are not necessarily the same exact size that you are. So it's not a question of how big you are, but how much you're paying as a portion of your payroll. Now, to do that, we also, CalPERS has basically two major categories of size agencies. The smaller agencies are all in what CalPERS refers to as the risk pool. What CalPERS did in, I think about 2012, 2010, somewhere around there, is put all agencies with fewer than 100 active members in a plan into the risk pool. That way you are sharing some of the experience risks that are going on. What would happen with small cities in the past is a couple of police officers might get killed in the line of duty, or firefighters disabled in the line of duty. And their costs would shoot through the roof as they had to pay off that higher liabilities. Rather than having that happen to one agency because of bad luck, those experiences shared across all the small agencies. So you are with fewer than 100 active employees in miscellaneous, fewer than 100 in safety, you are in the risk pools. So the classic members plans get measured against other classic plans, the PEPRA members against other PEPRA members, miscellaneous against miscellaneous, safety against safety. So we have a few sets of graphs to go through here. On the miscellaneous side, you're approximately 80% funded, and that pretty much puts you in the middle of where agencies are across, in CalPERS. So you're pretty much in the middle right now. Now your costs for miscellaneous as a percentage of pay are at the high end. The reason for that is hitting buttons too fast. The reason for that is that your contribution is a combination of normal cost for each year of service as it goes each year as they earn it, which is pretty consistent across all the agencies in the risk pool, plus a payment for unfunded liability. That payment for unfunded liability is a fixed dollar amount. And while your funded percentage is average, if to the extent that you have a number of vacancies right now, you are spreading that cost over fewer employees than you may have historically. And so as a percentage of payroll, that puts you in the upper end, the upper quartile of costs as a percentage of pay. For your miscellaneous, your tier 2, the tier 2 plans, again, as I mentioned before, a bunch of those throughout the state. Most of them started in 2011, 2012. They are all pretty well funded. So you're being 100% funded puts you right in the middle of where those are. And your contributions are basically normal cost. The differences between these are very small. Notice this is 10 to 11, 11 to 12. These are you're all in about the same place in terms of contributions. So that's in good shape. PEPRA also over 100% funded, puts you where most of the plans are, and your contribution is just normal cost. So you're right in the middle where 95% of the plans are throughout the state. On the safety side, funded percentage, 78.9, so roughly 80. Again, puts you right around the middle. 80 is where almost everybody is right now. So you're in good shape, not phenomenal shape, but good shape. The contributions, though, again, at the high end, seems like, again, if you're having trouble filling vacancies is causing this to be high as a percentage of pay. Tier 2, over 100% funded, so the contribution rate right in the middle, 22% at normal cost. And PEPRA, also over 100%, so your contributions are right in the middle at 13.5%. So overall, your funded percentage is in solid shape. But the, you know, and as you have the opportunity to start filling some of the vacancies, getting your workforce up to the levels they have been in the past, your contributions as a percentage of pay for the miscellaneous plans will come down as a percentage of pay, because unfunded liability payments are pretty much for past liability. New people have no past liability. So you won't have that increasing.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm so sorry. Our police department, are they in a tier all to themselves? Are they at a different percentage?
The safety is, yeah, which I think is your police.
Thank you.
Yeah. So they have a slightly higher benefit. And again, it's relatively well funded. But again, the classic plan workforce is a little bit, you know, smaller than the unfunded liability would indicate.
Yeah, so all of those unfilled positions in our police department are hurting us tremendously, probably.
As a percentage of pay. Now, the thing is, when you do fill them, those are probably going to be PEPRA people. And PEPRA people are less expensive. So your costs will, as a whole, get lower. But these numbers, the ones for the classic plan, the ones remaining, may, until you get that unfunded liability paid off, may look like they are very high as a percentage of pay.
Thank you.
Okay, so all this was as of June 30, 2021. What's happened since then? Well, I want to start off with, again, most important thing that affects all of this is investment return. Investment return the last 2 years has been volatile. CalPERS in the year ending June 30, 2021, so to get to the numbers we were showing, they announced a return of 21.3%. So one of the top 5 investment returns in CalPERS history. They followed that up 2022 with a minus 6.1, which is one of the bottom 5 investment returns in CalPERS history. So what we're basically seeing is volatility at levels we've never seen before. In fact, if you look at the last decade here, the green bars are investment returns on a year-by-year basis. They were relatively steady and solid throughout the 80s and 90s, but since 2000, especially since 2007, extremely volatile, up and down. And the thing is, this is not pointing at CalPERS. CalPERS has so much money, they need to be, very much in the market. And if you look at any large pension plan across the country, their graphs look very similar to this. So a lot of volatility. The red line here is the assumed rate of return, the discount rate. And if you look closely, you can see that it is slightly decreasing over time. It was 8.75% in the mid-'80s, dropped all the way down to 6.8% in 2021. The main reason it's been going down is because bond yields, which in 1980 were about 12%, still around 8% in 1984, dropped down to pretty much nothing in 2020. Now, in the last few months, the Fed has been raising those rates up again. So it's very possible when CalPERS looks at their assumed rate of return again in 2025, they may actually start to move it up a little bit. But given the volatility, there's going to be a lot happening between now and then. So I wouldn't jump that far ahead. Other thing I want to mention is these numbers that are shown are the numbers reported by CalPERS. They are the numbers that CalPERS announces in July of each year. The year ends June 30. They try and announce by mid-July what they earned in the previous year. That works very well for everything except for the portion of their portfolio that's in private equity. Private equity takes a little bit longer to properly value. So sometime in September, they announce in an investment committee meeting what the difference is between what they thought it was going to be in July and what it truly is going to be in, with private equity valued properly. Now in 2021, what that did is that turned this 21.3 into a 23.4. They found $6 billion. They announced it in the committee meeting, did not put it in any of the other reports, but they credited everybody with that extra amount. So you got credit for 23.4% return. In the year ending June 30, 22, that minus 6.1, they announced is going to be a minus 7.5. So basically, they beat their target by about 16% in 2021. They missed their target by about almost 15% in 2022. And losing money like that, less money for investment return, as I mentioned before, means more money is going to be required from contributions. So when I show you in a moment what happens to what's going to happen to your unfunded liability, it's going to go up. Contributions are going to go up to cover that and pay for it. So let's take a look at that. Contributions. The green line here is where contributions would have been for your city if the CalPERS had hit their 6.8% target every year following the 2021 valuation. Right now, for the 22-23 year, you're paying a little less than $3 million. It was going to go up just over $3 million and pretty much level off all the way through 2035, 36, then drop down as some of the amortization bases get paid off and get fully paid off around 2040. Instead, with the weak return, the minus 7.6, CalPERS phases in the impact of investment gains and losses over a 5-year period. So what we expect to see is contributions rising year by year for the next 5 years to go up, instead of leveling off at about 3 million, going up to about 4.3, 4.5 over the next 3 to 7 years. So an increase of about 50% during that time period. Now this is because unfunded liability is going to increase dramatically. As we see here, your unfunded liability this year is just under 20 million. Next year is supposed to drop to a little less than 19. Instead, it's going to go up to almost 30. So it's going to go up by almost 11 million by pretty much 50%. So your funded percentage, instead of being 80, it's going to drop down to 70. Now on those histograms of how you're doing in relation to everybody else, you're going to be in about the same place because everybody in CalPERS is in the same investment situation. And this is caused primarily because of the investments. So everybody's going to be moving over. Everybody's contribution rates are going up. And everybody's funded percentage is going down. So what can you do about it? Pretty much what it comes down to. Let's take a look at what you've done in the past. One of the things you did in the past is you issued bonds and you used the proceeds of those bonds. So in 2015, you issued bonds and used the proceeds of those bonds to pay off a portion of the city's unfunded liability. So without those bonds in there, you'd be in slightly worse shape than you are right now. You put 2.1 million into miscellaneous and 1 million into safety. So that's 3 million, compared to the 20 million you have right now. That's a good portion of that unfunded liability. You also, as I mentioned earlier, have employee cost sharing agreements in place. So the employees are making additional contributions, which differ by bargaining group, and they range anywhere from 0 to 3%, depending on when the person was hired and which bargaining group they're in. So you're having the employees share some of the pain that the city is going throughout this. So these are some good steps that you've taken in the past to help manage the cost and help you get to where you are right now. Moving forward, basically, unfortunately, the answer comes down to, in a variety of different ways, more money. Finding more money when you can, and allocating that and you have options as to where you put it. You could pay it directly to CalPERS, and that would immediately lower your unfunded liability, lower future contributions. You can set up internal reserves, basically set money aside when you have some extra, and then use it to help pay for benefits in the future as things go up. So set money aside now because you know the contribution rates are going up in future years. Or you can make contributions into a Section 115 trust. Section 115 trust is a place where you put money in. The money from there has to go to CalPERS, but you can decide when you do it. And because it's not an internal reserve, you have the flexibility of investing in things other than high quality, short-term government securities. Although the last few months, that's been the best place to be. But once the Fed stops raising interest rates and banks stop failing, and interest rates stabilize, you probably have a chance to make more money. Instead of making, what's now about 3% from your internal reserves, you can probably make 5 or 6 relatively safely in a Section 115 trust, and that extra money can help you lower costs over the long term. You've already issued pension obligation bonds. Now is not a good time to do it. The time to do it generally is when interest rates are low and the markets are going to do well. But thinking about that when the time is right may be an opportunity. And again, you don't have to pick one. You can do some combination of these things. As you do that, I've been focusing on the pensions. You all have a lot of other things, and I've listened to just some of them during your meeting so far going on, and you need to take it all into account. So as your budgeting process happens later this year, this is something to think about and to give guidance to your staff to be able to bring direction back to you. And that is the end of my prepared statements. Have I depressed you all, or do you have questions?
Wonderful. No, I don't know. It's the forecast of the whole country. So, but yes, as you said, I'm going to speak, but the numbers will speak for themselves. I think all of us hung our heads a little bit. Okay, well, I'm going to open it up to the council for questions. So does anybody have any direct questions on the information that we just received before we kind of turn it into a little discussion? Because I know Director Miller here might want some direction for us to have a future item about this.
Sarah, I have a question. I don't really understand contributions to 115 trust. If he could explain that a little further, I would be appreciative.
Okay, a Section 115 trust is under Section 115 of the Internal Revenue Code. It's basically a place, any money that you keep in your general fund, California law specifies that money can only be invested in very, very safe short-term government securities. So you're earning very little money on it. A Section 115 trust is a way to get around that rule to allow you to invest. And there are a few different places. It's basically like a bank account being held for the sole purpose of making future contributions towards your pension and paying off CalPERS. But it allows you to have flexibility as to when you move the money over, and gives you, so you can either use it to, again, prepare for a rainy day, stick extra money in when you have a slight surplus, but a budget surplus if things are going well, put money aside now to help you with future contributions 2, 3, 4 years from now, or you can use it as a place to make the contributions and help you get to 100% funding faster by going that way. And because it is basically a separate entity, you have the ability to invest that money. I wouldn't recommend doing it too aggressively, but conservatively, and still earn more than you can from the short-term bond obligation, short-term debt that you do in your general fund.
Who would manage that 115 trust?
There are a number of providers throughout the state. CalPERS runs one they call CEPT, which I don't remember what it stands for, CEPPT. PARS, a private company, was one of the first to set these up, and probably the CalPERS and PARS are the two biggest players throughout the state of California, but there are also others, Keenan, PFM, who do this and basically have investment advisors of their own, whether it's Vanguard or US Bank or others, to help advise them to make sure that their investments are safe and consistently getting solid returns. But if you decide to go in that direction, we can guide your staff to who to talk to as to who are the major providers throughout the state of California, and then you can take a look at what their historical returns have been and what the options they have to give you different flexibility in your investments.
Okay, pension obligation bonds, and what do they look like?
They're similar to what you did in 2015. You issue a bond. Your pension, your unfunded liability is a debt to the city. So you're basically issuing a bond, and what you're effectively doing, CalPERS, they're using a 6.8% discount rate. So they're effectively charging you 6.8% interest every year. So if you can go out when interest rates are low, like they were in 2020, some cities across California issued bonds at about a 2.5% rate. They then took that money, gave it to use the proceeds of the bonds to pay CalPERS. CalPERS then invested them. If they put it in 2020, they got the 23% return in 2021 before the bad return. If they waited and did get around to it till 2021, they put the money in and they lost money. You're going to have to pay the bondholders. But if if basically you borrow at something like 4% and CalPERS earns 6% on the money, you made a good deal and you lower your costs.
Can we float a bond and have the forest pay it off? I mean, that happened a long time ago, and that's how we picked up the property down where Health Sport is.
Ira, I can probably take that one. I mean, we would look, our pension is spread amongst all of our funds, and we'll talk through mid-year budget also this evening, so it'll give you a little sense of some of those funds. So it's partially general fund, but it's also partially our utility funds. So it's a mix. I mean, I think what we tried to capture in 2015 was exactly what GovInvest is describing, which was we had, at the time, PERS was requiring a portion of our unfunded liability to be paid off very quickly over about a 5-year period. And it was going to spike our rates for 5 years and bring them back down. So what we did was we borrowed a lower interest rate and we spread that payment over, I believe, 20 years so that we just didn't have that huge spike. We would have been looking at pretty significant layoffs just to make those payments. So there was kind of a double benefit to us in being able to smooth out that spike and at the same time be able to pay it off at a slightly lower interest rate.
So this is probably more for staff than for Mr. Summer, but I mean, have we been preemptive about this? Do we already start to have some money put aside?
We will actually get a little bit into that during midterm because we'll talk about your reserves in your various funds. So there are funds that are sort of set aside for rainy day contingencies, and that is a possibility. So.
Okay, and then as far as differing contributions, so I mean, if we already went through bargaining with our staff, we probably can't bring that back to the table for several more years as far as like upping contributions or whatnot, since we've pretty much just redid bargaining.
You can always bring things back to the table. There are some state caps on PEPRA contributions, and so you'll see those lower, and obviously you'll see those costs lower. I mean, ultimately, you're going to have very few classic employees left, so it's maybe not going to be the most significant item for you at the bargaining table, but it's certainly something we can always look at.
Sure. I just thank you for that deep dive that we did yesterday, because I can wrap my head around this so much more. I'll let somebody else ask a couple questions.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, I mean, let's turn it back to Council Member Matthews, Vice Mayor Matthews. I don't have any specific questions for Ira. I got what he was saying, all the wonderfully depressing news. And I'm more interested in moving forward with Tabitha to talk about possible solutions. So, I mean, you know, I just don't have any questions.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm looking forward to hearing what Tabitha has for us. But so if I am to understand, the more positions we fill, the better off, you know, we are.
I'm not sure that it depends. And it depends on if you're filling positions with some of those folks who have been in the pension system, you're going to take them in at the higher cost. The PEPRA positions are good, but all it does when you're filling positions, all it does is spread the cost over more people. And if you have more PEPRA people, then the cost per person is less, but it doesn't necessarily drop your cost. It is good in the big system because one of the challenges that CalPERS has gone through probably in the last 20 years, at the same time we had that volatility start in the interest rates, governments really stopped hiring at the same rates, so there are less people in the overall system contributing, which means that each person kind of costs more. So in the big picture, yes, but I don't know that it's specifically going to be a big benefit to us in this particular case.
All right, well, that makes total sense. So I think that, you know, moving forward, I like some of the ideas. I like, you know, setting some money aside. I like, you know, maybe exploring this 115 trust, but I'm really interested into what you have to say. And so I would just recommend that we ask for what you're recommending.
And what I would recommend at this point is that we come back to you with all of those ideas, and as sort of part of developing the budget for this next fiscal year, start looking at what it is that we want to put in place. A funding policy is probably a first step, and there's lots of options there. You can take, anytime you have sort of an excess in a given operating year, you can take 50% of it and either put it into a trust or pay it directly down. We can look at, obviously, pension bonds are not a great idea right now, but certainly making sure that those are in the plan at some point if interest rates do come down and it does make sense to take those on. You know, you said it earlier, you know, making sure that we are maximizing potentially what the employees are contributing to the program, and just start figuring out ways to even kind of move some of the cost of the other thing that they're talking about is when you're looking at funding capital, you know, maybe you take that cash and invest it in bonds as opposed to, you know, paying cash for an item. And those are the other things that we can look at as far as a long term. So everything kind of has everything comes together, and then you sort of go with the way the markets go, because everything has to have a contingency plan, as Ira said, because we do not know kind of how rates or returns are going to fall out in even the next year, let alone the next 5 years. It's not anywhere near as predictable as it was in the 1980s and 90s.
I'm really looking forward to your expertise on this. I'm super glad you're a part of our team. Thank you.
Okay, and we can tell Meredith is the one that loves budgets. But no, I totally wholeheartedly agree that, you know, to bring these options back to us, because it obviously looks like, yeah, it's got to get acted on soon. So any other questions from this side of the dais before we open it up for public comment? All right, let's open this item up for public comment. You will have 3 minutes to talk about the pension update, if anybody would like to comment. In person? Going once. There we go.
So I glanced at this a few days ago, but so are you telling me that our deficit is just under $30 million? That's accurate?
Right now, at the last report, it was about 20 million, but in June, when the June 30, 2022 report comes out, we expect it to be about $30 million, yes.
Okay, so I mean, I saw that other number, so I was pretty shocked at that. I had no idea that we had a deficit like that, because I guess in the past, sort of when we've talked about money, it was always sort of in a rosy way that we had like $4 million in our general funds and things like that. So I'm just wondering how that's going to get paid, you know, so that would be a basic question. And also, since in the package too, it sort of showed salary ranges for our leaders and mid managers too. So it also didn't really say how much the total compensation for those individuals. So it wasn't very transparent. I mean, for the city manager, I think the top step was like 165,000, if I remember right. And then it didn't have a total compensation. So I looked that up on the internet, and I don't know whether this figure is accurate, but the total compensation was like 250,000 or more. So I'm kind of surprised by, you know, these numbers and our deficit and how it's all going to work out. And then, you know, other things come up too from the standpoint of other liabilities that are kind of shockers where, you know, we get sued. And I remember in the last year kind of a bloody picture of an individual that was, I didn't know who it was, but it was the accused killer of Josh. And that payment was from a San Francisco jury was going to be $750,000 that they ruled in his favor. Fortunately, a judge overturned that. But and also in that article, I didn't know that his parents were awarded $250,000 from the city. So I just bring all this stuff up because it's a lot of money, and I don't know how it's all getting paid, and it doesn't seem like it's being very transparent to the public about what's going on. And there's very few of us that ever show up, and so this hasn't never been really on my radar as far as the finances. That's not my major, but I wonder whether we have anybody in the city that has MBAs or either she was just hired, right? But I'm just talking, this represents the past, so this has been going on a long time. So yeah, I have questions. Thanks.
All right. Any other in-person public comment before we move to Zoom? We will not be going back and forth. All right. Take it to Zoom. Comments on CalPERS.
All right. Our first speaker, Colin User, go ahead.
Ken Sawowski, thank you for the presentation and the prior speaker's questions. The good news is you have a secret weapon here, and the county doesn't, and you have a Tabitha, and that's going to put you in a very far superior position to the county. And congratulations again on achieving that secret weapon. For those of you who track finances and kind of understand the process, I think a relevant question would be, with what's going on and the perception of many people, and I deal with people on national, international, beyond just local business projections, is that what would happen if the stock market were to drop by 30%? And how is inflation calculated into this, and how is it affected? And it may be something that's beyond the scope of a short communication or question answering at this time. These are all questions I think you should find relevant. Any trigger could trigger it. We should see possibly being triggered by bank failures, possibly being triggered by housing collapse. Any of these things that would put you back in that 2008 position where you saw this thing drop. And it's kind of a cycle, and we probably, if you look at the trend, it is trending in that direction, and many of us feel we headed that way. Hate to be so doom and gloomish, but it will be a tough time for everybody sitting in your chairs as far as we can tell. And I started speaking a little earlier about how a lot of things that people felt were coming to fruition positive for Humboldt County may not necessarily be in the works. So strongly caution you in your future things regarding this and your budgeting to be as conservative as you can. And if Tabitha says this is the most conservative pathway you can take, I highly recommend you take it. So thank you for my opportunity to speak on this. And again, somebody may want to ask the question sometime, not now, what happens if the stock market drops by 30%? And that's a conservative estimate, according to many people I speak to. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Any other online comments?
We have one more. Jane, go ahead.
Good evening. Nice to hear this. This was very helpful to me. I'm sorry I didn't get the very beginning of it. But I would like to suggest that perhaps it's worth having a major study session with the council about to basically educate everybody about these various investment products, and how to calculate risk, and what to do in the face of risk. I think you really need a lot of numbers. You need to be able to go through them and understand them. And if those of you haven't taken economics or budgeting or don't have any background in this, you need to get educated so you can make good decisions financially. I would also like to comment that, for example, you can invest, as of last Friday in any event, I don't know if it's today, but you can get bonds at 4.55% for 19 months at U.S. Bank. So you really need to look around and see if you set up a trust where you could make a bunch of money in the short run with this money you set aside. So somebody should be busily looking at where they can invest right now, the funds that you might have in excess, assuming you do. So anyway, good luck with this. It's if you're not familiar with budgeting and economics and all the forecasting, etc., I would recommend you take time to do study sessions on this or get educated. This is a great presentation, but it's really important that you all understand what the possibilities are and not simply rely on one inside or outside person, that you all need to understand the implications of your decisions. Thank you very much. Good luck. This is a biggie.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Any other online comments? All right, so that brings us to the end of public comment here. Do we need any sort of motion, or did we get, it seems we kind of had consensus direction that we would like to, come back with an agenda item and see some of these options and as we go through budget season. All right.
That's good enough for me.
Perfect. And do we have any other questions or comments from the council before we move on? All right. I think we're going to take a quick 5-minute break before we dive into mid-year budget review. More numbers. All right, we'll be back in 5. But we're on the budget now. Okay. Yeah. Okay, we're back, folks. Just a quick aside, Council Member Atkins Salazar was not feeling well, so she is not going to be here the rest of our meeting. She is headed home to rest, so we wish her the best. All right, so that takes us to item C, which is our mid-year budget update. So consider adopting resolution number 223-44, resolution of the City Council of the City of Arcata to accept the mid-year budget review and approve associated budget revisions for the fiscal year 22-23. And so may we have a staff report?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, City Council. Again, Tabitha Miller, Finance Director. Before we get started on this, I am happy to answer questions you have specifically about the budget as we go through it. I am going to tell you I've been with the city for 6.5 weeks, so I may have to come back to you with answers. I just wanted to kind of lay that out ahead of time. We're really looking at 5 objectives tonight, and they were all sort of in the header that you read off, but getting an update on the mid-year budget, receiving those recommendations, and those are coming forward to you in the resolution 22344, and those are just some minor changes for unanticipated expenditures and new projects. We'd like to start looking at previewing where you're going to be at year-end 2022, 2023, and that gives us the base to look forward and start thinking about not just fiscal year 23-24, but I'd really like to kind of have the council start thinking about even years ahead of that. And when we're talking about pension and those sorts of items, those are really long-term decisions. And so I'd really like us to start looking at the 5-year and maybe even the 10-year horizon as we start looking at our budget so that we can plan accordingly. The other piece, and sort of the last one here to highlight, is you did have a goal setting session a few weeks ago, and I just kind of give you a little bit of homework, which is start thinking about how you take those goals and you build them into the budget in the next year and the next few years. Because at some point, unfortunately, budgets are always sort of like diets, and we end up having to sort of whittle things down and set priorities. This is just some of the larger items as far as what's included in that resolution we're asking you to review and possibly approve tonight. We have set aside $30,000 for an extreme weather sheltering. I know most of the council, if not all of you, were involved in setting this up over the last month or so when we had bad weather, and that pays for it. We've put aside $30,000 for the David Joshua Lawson mural. We're also asking, and this is a little bit of a unique item, the third one, the $355,000 so we can pre-order a street sweeper. This is because it takes 12 to 18 months to get a specialized vehicle. And in order to enter into that contract and set up the PO, we need to have the money set aside and available, although it is probably not going to be paid until fiscal year 24-25. So that is one of our asks. The fourth item, the $195,000 in total grant expenditures for the Carlson Park and River Access. This is actually a positive. There's an offsetting grant that's associated with this. We also are going to try to backfill a $185,000 deficit that's existing in your Internal Service Information Technologies Fund. This is just kind of truing that up and making sure that we're putting it in the positive. And then we've also seen citywide about $193 we're asking for increases in utility expenditures. And this is a combination of taking over the city actually paying full cost on your water and wastewater charges, but we have also seen a pretty significant increase in natural gas and electric, and that's kind of obvious in the last couple months. It's just that really bad weather we've had. So you had the drought with higher water cost in the late summer and fall, and then we had the higher utility bills for heating and maintaining of the buildings. So this is a big picture. This is all your funds, and there's a few items here. I'm not going to go into all the numbers, but I wanted to kind of give the council a big picture view. And there's also there's about 3 numbers in the presentation tonight that even if you are not a budget person, it's really good to know. You can impress your friends when you go to conferences and talk to other city council members that you know your budget. And the first one I would tell you is this number right here, your total expenditures. This is citywide, all of your funds. It's about $79 million. And that's kind of just a good number to have. And we'll talk about this a little bit in more detail in a minute. Your revenues are $65 million, and you can see, it's pretty obvious, that you have a $13 million shortfall. And I want to stress here that I'm not too worried about that, and there's a number of reasons. The first one is if you look at your top, and these are in order of the largest revenue and the largest expenditure base that you have, you'll notice that intergovernmental revenues is your largest source, and capital outlay is also your largest expense, and that is very abnormal. Those are extraordinarily high, but it's a reflection on the large amount of grants that you've received this year, and includes the money for your wastewater treatment plant, some of your water infrastructure. It's the almost $10 million for Project Home Key. It's the ARPA funding. It's all of those items that have given you a higher level of spending with other people's money, which is great news. But it is abnormal, and it does show that you're a little bit higher than normal. Really where those shortfalls are coming in, the first one is the grant revenue timing. And one of the things about grant revenue is that typically we don't recognize it until we spend it. So for example, a full amount of that 10.7 million is the 9.93 million for Project Home Key. We have actually received it. We have it in the bank, but we haven't recognized it as revenue. So it's not going to be there until that happens. But you do have the money in the bank. You are also in your water fund. You've got, I believe it's about $5.7 million in capital funding for infrastructure, and about half of that is actually being pulled from your fund reserves, which are built up specifically for that purpose. And then that 0.4 is actually that capital project encumbrance. It's the sweet streeper that we were talking about before, that the money needs to be budgeted but will not likely be spent until next year or the year after. Really quickly, fund definitions, and these are just terms that we'll use not only tonight but going forward, and I think it's kind of good to make sure that we're all on the same page. A fund is a basic independent budgeting and accounting entity. I typically relate this to if you have a large corporation. Many times they will have subsidiary companies that operate sort of independently, have their own self-set of books, but they may share resources and charge each other back and forth. And when at the end of the day, the corporation will report all of those operations, but separately. Same thing with funds when we go through them. Fund balance happens to be, it's the cumulative excess of your revenues over expenditures over the life of the fund. And you can have a negative, so your expenditures can be more, but in most cases they're positive. The one thing I'll talk about here is that this is a great resource and it's a great savings account, but typically when you use it is one-time money. It's not sustainable. Your general fund is the fund we usually talk most about, and it's typically the one with the most expenditures, and that's because it accounts for all of the resources that are not legally required to be held elsewhere. And so it's going to be most of your general revenues. It's your tax revenues, property tax, sales tax, those sorts of things. But it also includes your general operations, your public safety, and those things. So it has the most flexibility as far as spending, but it also has the most limits on it because it is available for other items. Your special revenue funds are legally restricted revenues. These are typically restricted for a specific purpose. Grants are a good example, and then special revenues where they've been specifically designated for a particular purpose and need to be set aside for that. Your enterprise funds, water and wastewater, are two great examples. I'll go ahead and, sorry about it. So your enterprise funds are funded with user fees and charges. Water, wastewater are your two great examples. And typically they're treated a little bit more like a business, and so their accounting's a little bit differently. And then in your internal service funds are used to account for services and materials that are actually funding your inner departments. And two good examples in the city are your information systems technology and your central garage, which is your fleet of vehicles. So this is an overview of your general fund, and it just gives you a good summary. The second number that I'd probably want you to kind of pay attention to, and I think is really helpful to put you in context of other organizations, is your general fund expenditures. And if you just round that off to $18.5 million, it's a number that you can compare yourself to other entities. It gives you a lot of ability to sort of size yourself up when you're looking at other entities. You will see that you do have you've got about $1 million in expenditures over revenues. And again, I'm not too worried about that. Much of that is funding for other funds. It is includes a portion of that street sweeper. It also has some grant funds in it. The other side of that is, and again, these balances that you've set aside for fund balances are good and strong. They don't look so good when you compare them to a $29.6 million liability for pension, but they are strong and you should be proud of them, and they do give you some resiliency moving forward. The middle number, the estimated unreserved fund balance as of 6/30/2022, this $6.75 million is the number from the beginning of fiscal year 21-22. And the reason for that is we haven't closed the books, and I didn't want to estimate and put out a bad number. Looking at where we're at to date, I believe that number will increase and you will have additional resources there. So this is a fairly conservative approach. In addition to that, you also have reserves for contingencies and emergencies, and that's about $5.7 million, or excuse me, $4.8 million. Between the two, you have a fund balance of about 58% of your total expenditures. And to put that into perspective, there are many governments that are striving to get to 20%. And I've seen those that 10 or 15% is not abnormal by any means. Your policy is a minimum of 25%. So you're in pretty good shape, but again, that may be something that we look at as far as pension funding going forward. This is a report on 32 of your individual special revenue funds. And your special revenue funds can be, some of them only have a few dollars in them, and some of them have millions. It includes your streets and gas taxes that are set aside specifically for road and street maintenance, many of your grant funds, your forest fund, ARPA, home key funding, those sorts of things. And you can see, again, your revenues are far less than what you're going to be spending this year, but it's because you're starting out with a nearly $21 million fund balance. And again, that's money we've received. In many cases, when it comes to grants, we have basically a mandate or a requirement that we spend them. So spending down fund balances in your special revenue funds is usually not a bad thing. In fact, it's a pretty good thing because you don't want to have to give the money back because you didn't meet your grant requirements. You're looking at about a $9.6 million at the end of the year. Your water enterprise fund, and I think it was interesting that Mr. Couch talked a lot about how we are going to continue to spend reserves on infrastructure. And that really is part of the reason that you have built up the numbers you have. You'll also see that you are spending more in this fund on capital this year. If we spend it all, then you are on operations. That's great. You're making an investment back into the system. And about half of that is actually being paid for by grant. And the other half is going to be coming out of your contingency reserve, which still after that expenditure will remain at about $5.5 million. The other piece is that your operating reserves, you've got about 64%, which again is well above that 20-25% dollar amount. Okay. First time. The other thing that I would point out about your water enterprise fund and the capital is it is, as Mr. Couch said, it is really expensive. So amazingly, when I looked at the value of what you had on the books for your water fund, The assets that we currently are carrying in our financial statements have a value of $7.7 million before we apply accumulated depreciation, which if you apply the accumulated depreciation, the value becomes pretty minimal. But replacing that $7.7 million is probably a factor of 10 or 15 times the original cost. So building up those contingency reserves really should be a priority for us. In addition, of course, to the pension obligations and those sorts of things. Your wastewater fund, again, another one where you've got 3/4 of your budget being spent on capital, which is amazing, and also almost all of that is being grant funded, which is also wonderful. Talking about those capital expenditures, we can see that you've got 285% reserves. And that's your available reserves, not even your capital. But when you start talking about a value of $29.1 million is your value of assets currently, and you talk about that 10 or 15 times over to restore it, we will need those funds. That is just kind of the way it is, and I would encourage us to continue to sort of set aside in that capital contingency, those funds for that future work. It will really, shore up the utility in the long term. Keeping in mind, again, that we've got some pretty significant changes coming in the next 3 years. You've got phase 1 of your wastewater treatment review, and that's $62 million. And then you've got the second phase after that. The other thing that has happened this year that I think should be noted is that your budget and where we're projecting you to be for revenue is $1.1 million more than anticipated, and that has a lot to do with the fact that you took the proactive step of increasing those rates so you could build up those reserves. So that's a lot of the reason for that increase, is just kind of watching out for the fund as you go forward. So when I originally started putting this report together last week, I put the question mark at the end of whether or not we need to be looking at or preparing for a recession. I almost took it off today, and then I decided not to, just because of in a week, things have gotten crazy. The markets, the banks, people are in a panic. What I would say is that you have contingencies in place. We have some pretty significant challenges coming forward, and we've talked about some of those tonight. But I think that we just need to sort of plan for it, but not necessarily go overboard. One of the things, and I don't know how much information you've gotten on the county sales tax, but something else that has happened is if you look over the last 3 quarters, if you go back to basically April through June of 2022, county sales tax has been down pretty significantly. And it's really bad in the unincorporated areas. This happens to be just a snapshot at that top. It was 14.4% below the prior year quarter for the third quarter, which is July through September. The countywide, which is collected, it's the Bradley Burns tax that's collected, the 1% that's collected by the state, all across the state, was only down 6.9%, but that's because you're taking into account your cities and not just the unincorporated area. Arcata, for that same period of time, was down 5.7%, and as you saw in the staff report, we are seeing that your sales tax numbers, both your TUT and your Bradley Burns 1%, are going to be slightly below budget, and they are going to be a little bit below last year. And that's probably a trend that we will look at carrying forward into the next fiscal year. Again, I'd rather be conservative there than overextend. The challenge here is that trend that's happening in Humboldt County doesn't seem to be happening in the rest of the state. The other, I think it's 13 counties that are reported in the north part of California. Their average is up 0.9%, and that varies from Humboldt County at the bottom at a negative 6.9, all the way up to, I believe it's Del Norte County that was up 13.5%. So they're not seeing the same trend that we are seeing. And I think, there's certainly some assumptions when you look at the details that has a lot to do with the cannabis industry collapse. And California's up 8% across the board. So they certainly have not seen any impacts yet like we are seeing here. I do make the statement here that I think we could probably say that Humboldt County probably is already in a recession based on those numbers. I will say that sales tax is not the same thing as gross domestic product, which is how you essentially figure out whether or not you've hit a recession. You have to have 2 quarters in a row where you've had negative GDP, and we just don't have that data available on our small scale. Some other things that we should take into account, kind of planning going forward and not panic like everybody else is, but the interest rate increases, 8 in the last year, have been pretty significant. We're up over 4.5%. Whether or not they raise them this next meeting is up for debate, but it does have impacts on things like housing in particular, and we saw the impact on investments and for banks and other folks. And something I would say here that we should keep in mind, because it'll be something that comes back that we address at a future time when we look at closing the books for fiscal year 21-22. When you start having interest rates, one of the things that you have to do, whether you're a government agency or you're a for-profit business or a public business, is you have to basically adjust your investments to market rate. And when you're in a position where interest rates are rising, the value, if you had to sell or liquidate your investments and you have lower interest rate payments on those, they're going to drop. And you have to recognize that, and that's a conservative way to make sure that you're kind of addressing what your liquidity is. You will see a little bit of a decrease in some negative earnings in the city when we bring forward your financial statements for next year. They're not most likely going to be realized because you'll hold those investments to maturity, but it is something that it kind of relates to the banking issue that's happening right now, and certainly what has been identified as Silicon Valley Bank's demise. Inflation is actually down. That's the good news. It went from 7% in 21 to 6.5% in 22, and it's now currently at 6%. Clearly still not where the Fed wants it. And it still is impacting all of us. We've got a lot of local things. Gas prices, I think we pay the highest gas price. Not only are our gas prices high in California, but Humboldt County is way at the top of that. Unemployment is very low. It's kind of interesting how that's sort of not addressed yet. And then we continue to be challenged with our housing. And if you look at the median cost of homes in Humboldt County, we are still in the top 11% for the nation. Just a few things, and again, we're not making any decisions on the future fiscal years, but things I'd like us to consider, and we'll be bringing back to you. We still have those capital projects, and we'll be finishing those up over the next few years. We've already had the conversation about the potential to place a tax measure on the ballot in 2024, and that's something else that we probably want to make a decision sooner rather than later, because we want to start laying the groundwork and the education for that. We've already talked about the pension. You have a 4% increase in staff wages that will be effective as of the new fiscal year too, so it's an additional cost. We are anticipating increases in all of your insurance, health, liability, and property, and some of that's market driven, some of that will be specific to the city. Recruitment challenges continue, cannabis industry challenges, and then of course climate change has impacts all over the place. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions I can. If I can't, I will get back to you.
I just had I'm brand new. This is my very first round doing this. I'm just curious why we call it a because yeah.
So in theory, we're looking at the numbers, and typically I will say this is done ideally
December.
Not usually December because we have to close the books, but typically it's going to be the late January, early February. You just didn't have anybody here until I
So
came.
it's because
It's
now
because of
we
me.
have you. Okay, that was why I was trying to understand just why we would call it that, and that is why. Thank you.
And it is kind of a little bit, one of the interesting things that I had a little bit of extra ability to look at the numbers and project forward, because I was looking at the numbers through February. Typically, you would really be looking at the numbers through December, but that is why.
So, thank you. I really appreciate your long-range planning and being really strategic. I want to thank Andrea for leaving us in this position. But, I think that I'm afraid that at goal setting that we were really, really specific, and I really wanted to keep it very high level, because I think that, with all of these things coming up, that we really need to be targeted about where we're spending our money and make sure that we have things, set aside. I know there's so much that we want to do, but, we have to keep the big picture in mind. And I think, the way things are trending, being conservative is not like the worst option. That's A. B, I'm going to read something from Councilmember Atkins Salazar before she left, which is going to tie into another comment that I made. All right. So this is from Stacy. Black Humboldt reached out to the cities of Arcata and Eureka for financial support for some of their upcoming activities. I'm wondering if we might direct staff to look into our ARPA outdoor grant funds or other funds that might be used to help with their activities in Arcata. And so, along those lines, I'd really like to revisit at some point the allocation that we made to Arcata Main Street. I took a look at the contract that we made with them, specifically called out gearing, spending some money towards, Black Humboldt or Queer Humboldt, like any of those. So, maybe redirecting some of that. And also, in that contract that we signed with Main Street, we also, we're supposed to get, we set aside $100,000. We were supposed to get, quarterly budget reviews. We haven't gotten anything from them. I would really, before we think of allocating, I know they had an executive director. Now they don't, but they have some great people that they hired. But I'd really, before we, figure out how much we're going to allocate to them, I'd really like to see a budget and see where that money is going. They were supposed to, like I said, they're supposed to bill us quarterly October, January, and then in April will be the third quarter, and we haven't seen anything from that. And, again, these are ARPA funds, so we can move it around. So I'd really like to look at that. And then I just, another goal that I have, I really would like to see, what we can do to brainstorm to get more money into our general fund. I'm concerned about, our local taxes and our TOT. We're going to be, we've got 3 hotels that we're not going to be getting TOT anymore. So we really, really have to be strategic about, where we're going to beef up our general fund. That's all. Thank you. Thank you.
Could I just ask a quick clarifying question, Meredith? When you were mentioning the outdoor grant funds possibly redirecting some of those towards Black Humboldt?
No, we allocated $100,000 of our ARPA fund to Arcata Main Street, but part of the contract that we haven't signed yet, that we should sign with Arcata Main Street, was that some of their funding that we give them be used for events such as that, like to help Black Humboldt, to help Queer Humboldt, to help the indigenous, just have events, around that support that. So I would like to see if, we can urge them to allocate some of that money, for, Black Humboldt or whatnot.
And when you say them, you're talking about Arcata Main Street? Yes. Okay, sorry. That was my confusion. And yes, I am wondering, what is our plan? And I apologize if I should know this, but for the loss of TOT, because we're actually talking about 5 that we're really losing, correct? With the 2 home key projects. And what are we looking at about? Is it like 400,000? It's going to be significantly higher than that?
The 3, when I just recently did a review of the 3 that Cal Poly will be leasing next year, that's close to 400,000. So, we had anticipated that we would We would be down about 80 to 100,000 with the home key projects originally, but some of that was banking on prices going up on the other hotels. So we'll be recalculating that as we go through budget, and we'll be making adjustments
Okay.
that we bring to you. So, but yeah, I would guess if we took all 5, that we're probably looking at about 550,000.
So for some reason, I thought that it was, I want to say like 189,000 for the 2 home key, or for some reason I thought it was a lot more than, what did you just say it was?
Well,
Should have wrote it down.
yeah, why don't I get you the final number for those 2? I'm pretty confident on the 3 that I just calced for Cal Poly at 390.
About 400,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So at least 500,000
Yep.
with all of them. And we're hoping that we might get a little something from Cal Poly is what we're,
They are working on ways to be able to support other city projects that would offset some of those general fund expenditures. Additionally, they will be opening those hotels during the summer months. So it will be, at least 9 months, but it won't be a full 12 months of revenue loss.
and that's where we made up, I think it was the 181 or whatever that number was for the IT.
We are doing some partnering on an IT project. We had 185,000 that was scheduled to be spent in the IT department that we think that we can keep in the IT department to shore up long-term deficit in there based on some additional support for projects coming from Cal Poly.
Thanks.
And I just wanted to also add on the Main Street contract, we have not received those quarterly reports. We have also not made payments and they have gone through tremendous transition. So I don't know exactly how much of those funds they anticipate to be billing us for at this point until we get those reports, but we haven't made payments out either.
Yeah, no shade at all, Main Street, they're wonderful, but it's $100,000.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I agree, because I've received some passing comments and letters from people just that like where did that money go? And I know that, they are now paying staff. They opted to go the route instead of having one, big director to kind of put that money out towards other, collaborating staff, which I think is a great idea. But yeah, to see the receipts, as they say, of, what's going on, and just get an update from them too, just about the changes would be good.
Yeah, maybe we can agendize that.
Yeah,
Could
agenda
you-
item. There it is.
Tell me the number again. Is it 200 or 300,000?
For what? 100? What, for,
Yeah, it was supposed to be 100 for the first year, and then we were going to revisit for a second year, and then possibly a third year with partnership with the chamber. I remember there was something about that, but we
Okay, that's where I was
nixed that.
getting
And
the
it was
numbers.
all out of ARPA funds.
Yes, from
Okay,
from the
all right.
ARPA money.
Thanks.
so this next year, Black Humboldt is going to have their event at Halverson Park. Black Humboldt will have it. I was told that when I went to an event recently.
I think what perhaps Vice Mayor Matthews was reading from, I did receive an email today as well from Black Humboldt, and they are looking at several of events. One of them is at Halverson, one is at the Vets Hall, and I'm not sure if that was Arcata or Eureka, but there is a block party that they're looking to have in Arcata. We did have some outdoor COVID grant funds, and I do believe we do still have some funds in that. Some of it we've used for events in Valley West, also Main Street's used some of those. The grant is managed predominantly through the Playhouse Arts, but we will work to see if we can get some funds to help support those through that grant program, because that is exactly what it's for.
So Jackie just sent out an email. I think is it April 23rd that they're trying to get everybody together
to figure out, we do have money
how
to spend in
it.
that, so
Yeah.
we'll, yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it? Okay,
I
great.
think we're getting a little bit in the weeds right now when I think we need to focus on what we're going to do moving forward.
Yeah, and if there's anything, now is the time too, if we like these changes being made, we accept them. If there's any additional changes that want to be made, I know Alex had an item that she wanted to bring up about something we could nix perhaps, and we'll discuss those.
So my feeling is, I know that you had in the budget, the redoing the back area for the council meeting room. I just think that's sort of a waste of money, and I would prefer to have it removed. I would like to see, in the very beginning when I came onto the council, there was some discussion about having mailboxes outside. I still think that that's not very expensive, because I just did it for tenants a year ago. that would be a good way for us to have our mailboxes outside, so we wouldn't have to come through and whatever. And I would like to have, I suggest that we remove from the budget any funds to take that back room and make it into a council meeting room.
That's a great idea, Alex. I'm all for that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one too, and we were able to talk a little bit about it because I know that idea kind of came from a past council, and it kind of ushered, into us. And I said, "Oh, that sounds cool," and you guys seem like you really want it when I joined. But I believe, Karen, you said that the planning really hasn't gone forward. We haven't really spent any money on that yet, so it would be an easy takeaway.
They've spent staff time measuring and figuring things out, but they haven't actually done the physical work.
Yeah.
How much money was allocated for that?
I don't have a clue.
Right, is it this one right in here? Other council materials and services, 60? Is it that one? Or, okay, something else.
No.
But I know that, I think it was like $50-some thousand.
I just think it's not necessary. So if there's something we think that's not necessary, I'd rather spend it on getting a new police car.
Could I just find out how much it is from somebody?
Let's see, it's in there somewhere.
Okay.
I'd like to know.
Yeah, it's about 15,000.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to put it into
5.
perspective
Oh,
of
they're saying
how
5.
much money we're
We
talking about.
originally had budgeted $10,000. Right now, the project is estimated at 5.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I also, one more time, would like to give a shout out to everybody, all the staff that has applied for all these grants. I mean, just looking at those reports and seeing how much money how many things are grant funded, that is spectacular. So I really appreciate that. So what do you need, like a motion from us, or?
Yeah, well, we're going to need to do public comment. So we're going to have public comment. So at this point, yeah, we'll invite public comment. So come on up if you'd like to comment. Line up at the podium now. And then we'll go to Zoom, and then we'll come back.
Okay, I'm going to zero in on a very detailed part of it, the street sweeper. Pre-COVID and during COVID, I called a number of times the city to address that there wasn't a street sweeper, and got the answer that basically there wasn't money or it was broken. So I'd like to point out that there's the State Water Quality Board that sets up the standards of storm water pollution prevention plan. And you might not think that's a big deal, but there's a lot of garbage that are on the streets. So what happens is during your rainstorms, it just carries all that garbage and plastic down the storm drains, where you've done a nice job of putting little creatures painted on the drains, but it defeats the purpose. So, I kind of went along with it and just said, I don't know what to say, but I called later on, a couple years later, and said, great, you got the street cleaners going again. But the problem is that there's cars like in Northtown and downtown that park along the curbs. So even though your street sweeper comes through, they cannot clean. So it still did not solve that. And basically, once I told them that, they were like, I got somebody at the desk, and that was it. So I want to remind you that one of the happy little accidents with your ambassador programs that they started cleaning, exactly what I was addressing, and that was, they said 8 tons of material. So over the years, when you don't have a street cleaner, that could be, I'm guessing 20, 50, 100 tons of material that go out into the wetlands. It goes out down the river. It goes out to the Pacific. And one of the reasons why there's a big patch out there that's twice the size of Texas is because of, cities like Arcata that are trying to be environmental, but are sort of like not quite doing the most important things. So I'm definitely in favor of a street sweeper, but I just like, it's pretty a serious thing. And maybe I was only like 19 years old when I took some environmental classes, but I don't think it's like a choice. I think it's like mandatory, and you could be actually in trouble right now for not doing that. And it's sort of like even 18,000 population and one street sweeper. I don't know if that's even like really doing the job, but there needs to be some like pretty serious attention to that. And maybe since you're trying to save some money, you should throw some money soon and get that going.
Hi, my name's Joanne McGarry, and I'm just swimming in numbers and thoughts, but I want to thank Vice Mayor Meredith Matthews for bringing up the Main Street monies and making sure we revisit and see where monies have been spent, where monies can go. I also want to just say personally, on my very limited income, I do really try and shop local. I order very little to nothing online. I never have ordered from Amazon. And so I'm doing what I can in my small way to get that sales tax up and, you know, just all that. But one of the things that when we were talking about priorities for the next year and things, and I came up and spoke, was kind of the concept of braiding things together. And sometimes when you step back and look at how things can be done more efficiently, effectively, it sometimes comes from getting different things to move together, and that also can mean in the terms of money expenditures. And so when we're looking at things like Main Street and the Chamber, I think maybe we really need to seriously look at why two entities exist in that way in the current times. You know, it could be a time where they could split off again, but sometimes we isolate things and piecemeal things, and something separate in one part of town and in another part of town, and we maybe need to be more holistic. And by being more holistic, we can be more efficient and cost effective in a lot of these expenditure things. So I'll do what I can, but I finally, in my final 55 seconds, I want to talk about the unhoused situation and that reality. And I think putting a lot of effort, time, energy, people, and money to really get a handle on that, it will open up a lot of opportunities for a lot of other things in our community. And finally, we cannot ignore the climate reality, and everything we do, we should look at that first and foremost in terms of mitigating and adapting and spending money up front so that we won't have to spend a lot more money afterwards. So the homeless issue and climate change really need to be looked at seriously when we're talking about budget matters. So let's braid things together. Be cost effective, and thank you.
My thanks and appreciation to the Finance Director for a very clear, concise, and easy to understand presentation. Thank you.
I just want to mention the street sweeper. Over the years, they've said, we hold it together like with rubber bands and tape and glue, and it's been really difficult. And so I'm really happy to see that we're finally going to have a street sweeper, something that could actually work every day. And it had to be so frustrating for the street sweeper person that ran the vehicle not to be able to keep it running. So I'm thankful about that finally happening, because that's a long term. I'd say that's over 15 years that's been happening, that we haven't been able to keep it together.
All right, do we have Zoom public comment? We got to go to Zoom, and we'll come back.
No public comment online.
All right, so bring it back to the council for any last minute questions, comments, or we will entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 223-44.
I'd like to make.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Do we need to adopt something to remove something from the budget? If we want to remove the council office, or is that taken action before we adopt the budget?
I would just make that as a separate motion.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make the first motion then, to recommend that the council adopt resolution, oh my God, 223-44, resolution of the City Council of the City of Arcata to amend resolution number 223-01, adopting the annual budget for fiscal year 2022-23.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to adopt mid-year. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously, and then
So
there's
I'll
a
make
second motion.
I'll make a motion that we take out of the budget any improvements for our council office.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that passes unanimously as well. Okay.
Thank you. What was your vote, Kimberly?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Tabitha. Yes, wonderful and very, very clear and concise, and I like it that way. It helps me. All right, that takes us to item D, which is to approve proposed amendments to the Humboldt Waste Management Authority's Joint Powers Agreement and direct the mayor, to execute the restated and amended agreement. I just didn't.
Good evening, council members. So I will do my best to keep this straightforward and concise. Happy to jump into questions or the weeds as helpful. So this action relates to SB 1383, which essentially is the organics diversion state mandates. I won't spend a lot of time delving into all the various requirements of 1383, but what I will say is that this is the second decision point that the council has before them. The first decision point was at the end of December 2022, and that was adopting the ordinance, which is essentially Arcata's enforcement mechanism for implementing 1383. Concurrent with that introduction of the ordinance, the City Council passed a letter of intent to provide flow control to Humboldt Waste Management Authority for processing organic materials, essentially creating a regional, or creating the framework to develop regional organics processing. So the item here before you is an amended joint powers agreement. And what that will essentially do is provide the mechanism to establish flow control such that HWMA can move forward in establishing that regional organics processing infrastructure. Backing up a little bit into process, February of 2023, the HWMA board approved the draft language for this JPA amendment, restated and amended JPA. Since the board has approved the draft language, the draft JPA is being reviewed or will be reviewed by all the decision-making bodies of the various member agencies, Arcata being one of them. If 70% of the member agencies pass or approve the draft language, it will go back to the HWMA board for finalization. And then from there will be a forthcoming MOU that will specify the organics material for flow control for HWMA. So essentially this is one piece in this JPA amendment process, which is one piece in the SB 1383 compliance framework. And again, this is the second decision point for the council. There will be much more to come in the coming months and years, so you'll be seeing me here a lot talking about SB 1383. So with that, I'm happy to pause and answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see some movement after what seemed like a year of kind of stagnation. So I'm really glad that things are happening. You know, the HWMA is applying for grants that should cover a lot of this. You know, basically, you know, giving them flow control means that they're just gonna, we don't have to figure it out. The one thing that I would like to agendize at a later date is to really review our recology contract.
Yep, and I can speak a little bit to that. So we have been beginning conversations and negotiations with Recology. When did we bring this up? We brought this up at the goal setting session most recently. So we have retained a consultant to assist the city with SB 1383 and franchise agreement negotiations, so we can really bring that technical expertise to ensure we are getting the most effective programs and subsequent rates for the Arcata residents. So certainly that will be coming back once we do have franchise agreement language. And we're also in addition to working at the Arcata Recology level, we're also working with the other Humboldt County jurisdictions to see where we might be able to realize some efficiencies and cost savings, and ensuring that we're really looking at Humboldt County on a broad scale. So there will be a lot more to come in the coming months there as well.
Yeah, and I think it's really promising that Fortuna and Trinidad are also going to join the JPA, so that's kind of like pretty much most of Humboldt County, so I think that's a really great sign.
Great. Yeah, I feel great about this. It looks good. And any other questions from this side of the dais, or
No,
we
I
can
just
take public
always think,
comment?
I always mention, I sound like a broken record, digester.
I think that's included in the grant, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken.
The current grant proposal, and I don't want to speak too much on behalf of HWMA, but they are working with City of Eureka as well as a consultant, and it's really for the organics pre-processing infrastructure at this point. So it'll be more sorting, sorting and creating a slurry, if you will, less anaerobic digestion.
Well, I know that they're going to be taking the waste somewhere else. And that is what I would like to see, that eventually that doesn't have to happen, and that we can actually control it and manage it within our own community. Because it, as you think about things, it is ours, and we're giving it to someone else. So thank you for that. But I'll
All right.
always bring up digester, because
Okay.
I've
Add it
thought
to your
about it
notes,
for
digester.
years.
All right, let's take public comment on this item, and then we will come back for approval.
Say that I like the regionalism concepts on big matters like this, when we have to respond to a state bill that's very complicated and whatever. So, you know, cost savings again can hopefully happen if we blend regionally some of our efforts. I do want to ask the question of the Edgar Associates and the cost of the whole, and the portion of the costs that we are paying to these consultants or advisors from Arcata for this project. Was there a cost that was incurred?
Sure. So, I mean, I can briefly just say there is not a cost associated with this agenda item before you. The grant that was brought up is being cost contributed by the various participating jurisdictions. Arcata is about 12% of overall. I'd have to get back to you with a specific number, but 12% of the overall consultant cost.
Good evening. Last time this came up, I brought up a PBS News Hour from a story from a few years ago from Paul Solner. It was a state of recycling that was going on all over the United States. And unfortunately, in 2019, most of our recycling was going to China, and the Chinese cut us off, and basically we were stuck with it. And so part of that story of the News Hour was that what were we doing with our recycling, because we didn't really have anybody that was interested in buying it. So during that story, you could see some of the cities that were the problems they were facing from the standpoint. A lot of it was just ending up going into the dump. Basically, they stored in warehouses and they couldn't find buyers. So one of my questions is like, what's going on here? Is that what's happening here? Or, and basically how much is really being recycled from cardboard, plastic? Because a recent article that I also shared with Karen was that basically the number was the best anybody's doing is 13% plastic. The only plastic that's being recycled is number one, and number two, the rest of it's just going to the dump. Even California has a new law that you can't just put that recycling standard on anything, because people just are going to throw it in there thinking it. So we need to have some serious, I mean, you should be like addressing what's going on with our recycling. I don't actually know the details. I mean, I sort of asked Karen, but it wasn't really, her answer wasn't that precise on, you know, where it's going. And I shared about 6 links from that recent article for the New York Times, and it shows pictures of it going to Africa, and you see kids, you know, like going through the dump. We're talking about like really bad stuff. And I mean, I don't know, does it get shipped there? I don't know the answer to that, but it is happening and it's coming from the US. So, I mean, it's a pretty serious issue, and we have this flag that we put up on the pole, but does that really mean we're environmentalists? Are we looking really under the hood to see whether we're really doing the right thing? Or are we just kind of like accepting it's all being taken care of? So I think that's somebody on the city council should really like look into this and let us know what is really happening, you know? So this is linked to also comments that I made about the plastic being out in the ocean. I mean, I'm really upset about this from the standpoint, I went on a vacation to Colombia and I went scuba diving 425 miles off the coast there, and this is supposed to be a pristine, you know, place to dive as clean as possible. And I spent like 2 days of my diving just picking up plastic all over the ocean. So it's all over the place. It's in our food supply, and it's also in us too now, unfortunately.
So HWMA meets the second Thursday of every month at 5:30 at the Eureka Council Chambers. We'd love to have you come and make comments there. We've had a lot of presentations about just what you're talking about. So, you know, reach out.
So I think another thing that'll happen is once we start this food waste, you aren't supposed to put in your cardboard pizza boxes because of the oil, but you'll be able to put them in the compost.
Okay.
And so that'll be a good solution, especially because Domino's Pizza puts on the front of their whole thing about recycling this. They have a little sign about how to recycle them.
Ecology won't pick your recycling bin up if there's a pizza box in it. It's happened to me multiple times. Even when I thought it was so clean. But okay, we have to make sure we don't have any public comment on Zoom, and then we'll come back for discussion and a motion.
There's no public comment online.
Okay.
All right. I would like to make a motion to direct the mayor to execute the restated and amended agreement.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item E, but item E is going to be postponed and continued to the April 5th agenda. So that takes us to oral and written communications. City appreciates your public input, and this time is provided for people to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. So if you are here in person to give public comment, please line up at the podium. Or if you are on Zoom, raise your hand, press *9. If you're on your phone line and would like to make comment. So speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. And when it is your time for comment, you will be either unmuted or invited to speak. So I'm going to unmute you. No.
Thank you.
Take it away.
My name is Fred Wise. I'd like to commend Councilmember Stillman and any other council members who are watching the Planning Commission meetings. I recognize the importance of that. At the meeting on last night, I urged the council to watch the video starting at the hour 2 hours and 54 or 55 minutes. Sherry Starr spoke, and I'll be writing an article about this. Basically, the summaries of the recommendations that the Transportation Safety Committee have been presented to the Planning Commission. Those summaries are substantially inaccurate, and Sherry spoke to this. I've spoken to the Transportation Safety Committee about this also. David Loya, or Director Loya, maintains that the summaries are accurate, but they're not at all. The Commissioner Mayor found this situation to be upsetting. This is not the first time this happened. It's happened multiple times, and brings into question the process of the accuracy of the framework of the committee findings going to the commission. I think this will all be corrected. The Transportation Safety Committee is meeting March 21st. But as I say, it's not the first time. And the one question I have for the council is if the council is interested in making a decision on L Street based upon the Transportation Safety Committee's clear and strong recommendation for the linear park. The reason I ask is because any form-based code work that's done on the Gateway Corridor District that includes K Street will have to be redone if that decision is not made before he does the work. I spoke with Ben Noble about this. He was very specific about it. I can send you that that conversation. What's happening with the Planning Commission now is essentially they've gone from a 10-mile-an-hour speed of ambling through this gateway plan for the last 14 months to a 90-mile-per-hour speed, trying to get things done. And my concern is that a lot of important areas are going to be ignored, discarded, or forgotten, including such large areas as home ownership possibilities and housing that can be created that will actually be accessible to people who make $20 or $25 or $30 an hour. That's all not being considered in the current process. That's about it. I'll be reporting occasionally. I don't think there's enough weeks left for them to do any kind of a decent job. And so we'll find out what happens as the next 8 weeks or 8 sessions go on. Thanks.
Next week at this time is, I believe, our big session with the sea level rise experts. So, right? Oh, sorry. 28th. I think it's going to be important that we know in advance who those individuals are and what organizations they're coming from. That would be helpful to know, you know.
Fred probably has that because they talked about that last night at the Planning Commission. He probably has already posted on arcata1.com.
I didn't remember anybody's names.
We're interrupting people's time.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So yeah, I think that's important. I mean, it gives maybe the public an opportunity to ask some questions to the experts, since I don't know how the format's set up where, you know, for public speaking when we come to the big group, it's barely minimum on the public usually. So I think that would be really helpful if we could get that information. And also in the big picture of things, I try to think a little bit outside the box, but one of the reasons that I have a lot of concerns is that, you know, when we look at those levels of sea level rise and the areas that we're going to be building, and I think I've expressed this in my letters to you, but it seemed like it would be a much wiser decision to build, you know, where we have bedrock for earthquakes and we're not going to be dealing with sea level rise in the future, that we're not going to set ourselves up for another low or G Street problem, which we haven't even really addressed that. We're going to have to move people in the future someplace. So that's like, you know, a big concern of mine, that we're not repeating the same mistake. And that's kind of what we do with history. We tend to repeat the same things, and we have a really long history in the U.S. of putting potentially, especially poor people in these areas. And you know, it's affecting the federal government from the standpoint of billions, or not trillions of dollars, of trying to figure out how to get them out of there, and, you know, basically buyouts of their houses. That's pretty much the only option. Otherwise, you just keep seeing FEMA coming in there and spending a lot of money, and FEMA goes like bankrupt every year because of this. So that's a main reason why I have such a big concern about this. But also in other areas too, that I guess maybe, I don't know, I'll send an article from the New York Times, but they're also the cost of global warming. And I don't think you're necessarily thinking about that from a financial standpoint of insurance. We see that in California from the standpoint of, you know, in the fire areas, that people are getting their insurance canceled or rates go up. But with sea level rise, that's going to be another issue too. As far as the gateway area there, that these unexpected things are going to result in, you know, expenses that no one's thinking about.
Hi, my name's Joanne McGarry, and 3 things I want to talk about include, I've sent emails to you on various topics and issues and stories of interest that I hope many of you have taken a look at. I had the benefit of living in other places for long periods of time and making connections there with a lot of people who are doing some amazing things. And so I like to bring them up here to my current home here in Arcata and Humboldt County and share them with you, because I think oftentimes we don't appreciate what's happening elsewhere, and there's a little bit of internal pride or whatever in some of the things that we do. But one of the issues I brought up and I mentioned earlier, and I tried to share it with some of you, but I'll do it officially in an email to you, is this eco machine, or the decentralized wastewater concept. And when I spoke about visionaries for the Creeks and Wetlands Committee and all, we really need to get down to nuts and bolts, but we also need to step back and look forward. And as Tabitha suggested in terms of budgeting, that's also what we need to do, but we need to vision, you know, a plan and an idea for our future. And but I do that so often, and I'll try and share it with you, and hopefully you appreciate it. But looking at some alternatives to these very costly fixer-uppers of things like the marsh, I'm really concerned about phase 2 and levees breaking, and the levee broke in Pajaro because of this extreme weather, because the climate is... I've read recently that these atmospheric rivers may not be as frequent, but they will be 25% more intense in the future. And so that's another thing about emergency preparedness, and just all of us coming together in a much more holistic and cohesive way. But I'm going to kind of get down to the nitty-gritty issues that are currently hitting me in the face on the streets, and that is the unhoused situation. And I mentioned the concern about people not having safe and warm places. Now I'm concerned that there's people coming into town and literally dumping puppies in unhoused people's laps. And I've got experience in animal welfare, and I really think we need to start there in some ways with dealing with this issue that will really help our community by helping the people and their animals somehow find a different way to exist in our community that's safe and sound and humane for the people and the animals. And I'm just putting it out there that I want to help in whatever way I can, be on any kind of task force or whatever. Let me participate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joanne. We will take it to Zoom for public comment.
Yes, call-in user, go ahead.
Hello, I'd like to, Ken Sawatsky, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can hear you.
I always ask with technology, it doesn't always go through. So I would like to echo pretty well what the prior speaker said on many of these topics. Unfortunately, Arcata has so many of its eggs in one basket regarding waste treatment. I learned from what happens around the world, and a simple 9.2 earthquake, which happened, took out Japan, took out their major facilities. When an 80-foot wall of water comes through, and of course, the area where you're intending to develop is within that range. I'm sure an 80-foot wall of water would take that in its entirety, along with your wastewater treatment system. So I seriously think the most areas should look at alternatives as far as not having all those in one area. If that were to be eliminated, of course, I don't know what Arcata would do. So let's play worst case scenario. With Tabitha's speaking with you earlier, many of us feel that these inflation numbers are so far below what we actually see happening, those of us in the building trade and buying products and things, that those inflation rates are ridiculously, as they're being reflected. I guess that's creative math to make everybody feel better, but I think we're all feeling way more of a pinch than that. I applaud the idea that she saw what was happening currently the last few days here, and but no matter what, I think you should look toward a recession or depression. She said we're already in it in Humboldt County. I don't feel it at all compared to what I've experienced in the past as far as recessions go. They maybe have lower standards for that. But when it does hit, you're going to be in a position where I think you're going to wish that you saved every penny. Applaud saving $5,000 or whatever you're saving every time you get a chance for something that's not necessary, because that's going to make a big difference later. So I hate to be so much doom and gloom, but I do highly recommend that you take that doom and gloom thing. Now, some good things that are happening. It sounds like we're having whole new sources of storage. It sounds like what I call the fentanyl of the energy storage system with the lithium batteries may be replaced by a new technology coming out of MIT in carbon batteries. And our guess is for people I talk to who do deal with MIT and NASA and things like that, that we will have alternative sources of energy way before you get these wind turbines off the coast generating anything. We'll have far superior consistent sources of energy that won't require storage. So those are some good things that may be in the works. On the other hand, eventually we are going to have a major collapse. And the question I asked about a 30% reduction in the value of the PERS and PARs related to stock market was very conservative. So you may wish to actually ask some of the questions that people ask you to ask sometimes. That's up to you. I'm very
Kent, thank you.
reluctant to have I told you so. So thank you for my 3 minutes.
Thank you. All right. Any other online public comment this evening?
There is no other online public comment.
All right. So that takes us to council and staff reports. Do we have any staff updates?
No, just encourage the residents to recognize we've got new electric buses that are going to be hitting the street next week. So we just toured them tonight, and both of them have arrived, and both have their city logos on them, and they will be starting up. So it's exciting to see.
So I posted a photograph, and this person said, I was staring at that, wondering why it had a bow on the front. And it makes so much more sense. But honestly, he thought some random person stuck it on there. So I said, we weren't on a regular route and so forth. But it was great to be on that bus and to take that ride. And I think it's good, even though people must have been amazed to see a bus going in the route we were in, because it's nothing they would ever do. So it was fun. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. The bow caused some thought.
All right. If that's our only staff update, then any council updates? I know the big update is we're all excited to go to Monterey this weekend and learn and go to the Civic Well Conference. So that's my only update.
I just want to let everybody know that I won't be at the next council meeting on April 5th. It is the first night of Passover. I'm sad that there had to be a council meeting scheduled on an important Jewish holiday, but here we are. We have a full council now, so there'll be plenty of people here. Happy Passover to those who celebrate.
So I just wanted to mention something that's near and dear to Joanne's and other hearts. Our space is another opportunity for the unhoused to do art and get out of the rain. It's located on 9th Street, across from Hensel's Ace Hardware. Arcata House Partnership is looking for volunteers as they're closing down their extreme weather shelter to do some sanitizing and cleaning. And both Sarah and our Mayor Schaefer and myself have been meeting with a group of constituents, faith-based organizations, as well as Arcata House Partnership and AHA, to further strategize homeless service and resources. So we are trying to find more resources. I had a scheduling conflict, but Sarah can probably share more about that if she would like. And then just real quick, as Fred had requested to allocate, I think it was maybe 175, maybe it was 155, for recording the upcoming joint sessions. I was hoping that we might be able to address that. I know that the next one is going to be on March 28th. Otherwise, the community will be likely passing the basket to record this again. And then also, was going to mention what Sarah already did. Civic Well Conference, pretty excited about that. That's it for me.
I will just, I can add in just on the group that we have been meeting with. I was overwhelmed by the number of people that community member up in Lazy J had gathered together for this meeting, because I said, invite whoever. I was not in the planning of that, but I would say we probably had like 20 to 25 people in this room whenever that was, Thursday, of all faith-based leaders, members from True North, Housing Faith Group, Arcata House Partnership staff, Arcata House Partnership board members, Nezzy Wade from AHA, and myself, and just some other folks that have been working on that with me. So it was a really good kind of first meeting of just folks getting together and seeing, what resources can we offer, what are we interested in collaborating on, just a lot of talk about me kind of coming to the realization there's a lot of basic things I think that the city can help support, or, you know, hook up these organizations together to be able to support things like storage lockers for houseless folks that might need to go, you know, ride the bus over to Eureka and go schlep around some offices and, you know, can't carry all of their stuff. I've actually recently, by my work in Eureka, have found a houseless individual that I've now noticed he leaves his backpack and his bag and his dog, sadly, you know, tied up by a neighboring fence by the bus stop. And I've realized he goes on the bus and leaves all of his stuff there and then comes back, and, you know, realizing that, yeah, folks need a place to put their stuff if they don't have a home to put it in. And so just basic things like that, and just other talks about sanitation and bathrooms and everywhere, you know, everything like that. And so starting to be able to get some folks together that we can collaborate on that, it felt really positive. So,
Well, I think that's also what Kim, the mayor in Eureka, is doing also. So she's involved in she had that meeting. I think you attended that, Kimberly. And so I think, what I look forward to is to figure out how we can work together, both City of Arcata and Eureka, so we don't have to duplicate services, and we can figure out how to actually handle things in a more
I'm meeting
equitable way.
I'm meeting with Mayor Kim Burrell on Monday, so we'll see what comes out of that.
Definitely want to collaborate with the county as well, which is what Eureka was doing also too.
And it's Arcata Playhouse that is running, they've taken over the Stebbins building downstairs, and that's what they're doing. It used to be a place that Hinsel's Hardware, when that building was built originally, it was for Hinsel's Hardware was in there. And after they completed their lease, I think it was a 10-year lease or 20 or something, a long time, they decided they were going to move, because they bought the Sealy and Titlow building, and they decided they were going to move into that. So then people that were in there moved out, and that's where they moved the paint, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we have a vacancy.
all right. Well, I think with that, we are adjourned. So yeah, let's get some sleep here.